Good evening. The May 8th meeting of the Evanston City Council will come to order. Will the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Burns. Councilmember Suffredin.
Here.
Councilmember Ravel. Here. Councilmember Reed.
Here.
Councilmember Hadakaris.
Here.
Councilmember Kelly. Here. Councilmember Harris.
Present.
Councilmember Nguyen. Here. Councilmember Newsma.
Here.
And I am here. We have a quorum present and are prepared to do our work. For reasons that I hope are obvious, we will begin the evening's agenda by skipping straight to SP1, the administration of Athenian oaths of citizenship and oaths of office to the two council members who were elected in the April election. We have the great honor of being joined to give a prayer in advance of this important moment. Pastor Michael Neighbors of Second Baptist Church. Pastor Neighbors, would you be willing to come forward, please?
Mayor and council members, I'm grateful for the opportunity to offer a word of prayer for those who are being sworn in tonight. Chrissy and Juan, we are grateful for you, but also a prayer for this entire council. I think that you all must feel absolutely wonderful and gratified to see that there is such a full house for your swearing in. Amen. Let us pray. Loving and eternal and gracious God, creator and maker of all of the universe, we come now asking that you would look down upon this city council and that you would especially look down upon those who represent the wards that are being sworn in tonight. Chrissy and Juan, all the persons of great capacity and ability and talent who have been voted in by residents of this Evanston community. We pray that you would bless them and that you would grant them acuity of mind, clarity of tongue, that they might be able to move forward and to usher in a spirit of mutual cooperation. For we know that the saying is true. It is not so much the words of evil people that are destroying the world, but it is the appalling silence of good people. And so we pray now that you would bless this entire city council, and not only Chrissy and Juan, but we ask that you would be a blessing to Bobby and Devin and Tom and Juan and Jonathan, Eleanor, Melissa, Claire, and Chrissy. We ask that you would anoint them with such power that they might be able to usher in a new day of mutual cooperation. We pray that where there is darkness, they might be able to bring light. Where there is division, we pray that they would be able to bring in unity. Where there is disagreement, we pray that you would help them to usher in a spirit where they can agree to disagree. And mostly we pray that you would help them to recognize they represent this Evanston community, which in my estimation is one of the best and finest on earth. Help them to be patient and to know that in this 8 square miles, every single person in Evanston has a right to say and speak their mind, and they often do. And so we pray that you would give them patience and kindness, and that as we begin this new moment, they would be filled with encouragement from those who are here tonight, their families as well. This we pray in the magnificent name of the Creator of all. Amen.
Thank you so much, Pastor. Thank you for being with us this evening and for those powerful and important words. Each of the two elected council members has friends and supporters and fans and loved ones with them, and so we're going to do these one at a time using the time-honored method of noticing that 2 is a smaller number than 9. We'll begin with Councilmember Harris. So I'll ask you to join me in front of the dais. We'll administer the oath, and then you can be joined by any family and supporters as well who you want to be a part of the ceremony.
Councilmember Harris's family can come up if you wish to.
Councilmember, would you raise your right hand, please? I, Chrissy Harris,
I, Chrissy Harris,
having been elected to the office of councilmember
having been elected to the office of council member
in the city of Evanston,
in the city of Evanston,
in the county of Cook, aforesaid,
in the county of Cook, aforesaid,
do solemnly affirm
do solemnly affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the state of Illinois,
and the Constitution of the state of Illinois,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of council member to the best of my abilities.
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties of council member to the best of my abilities, and try to remember.
Congratulations, council member. But, this is Evanston, we're not done. Here in Evanston, we also swear the Athenian oath of citizenship. And so if you would join me with this one as well.
Right hand,
I'm not sure about that.
both hands.
We will strive for the ideal and sacred things of the city,
We will strive for the ideal and sacred things of the city. We're gonna read this together. Things of the city,
both alone and with many.
both alone and with many.
We will unceasingly seek to quicken the sense of public duty,
We will unceasingly seek to quicken the sense of public duty.
we will revere and obey the city's laws,
We will revere and obey the city's laws,
and will transmit the city
and will transmit the city,
not less but greater and more beautiful than when it was transmitted to us.
not less, but greater and more beautiful than when it was transmitted to us. So, thank you all for all being here for me and Juan. You know that. It was a struggle. And if you lived in Evanston, if you paid attention to the election, it was very interesting. And I believe I have thick skin. I was born April 1st. So you have to have thick skin from beginning to end. But untruths hurt. And watching your family try to struggle through those hurts even more. Because for me, say what you will. So I appreciate everyone that is behind me because they supported me, kept me lifted. I appreciate the Second Ward for voting their conscience. Evanston is a great place, and we know this. We believe this because that's why we're here. And I will continue to do the work. And as Pastor Neighbors, my pastor, said, we deserve to have our say, but in the reality is we know that we cannot give you 78,000 choices. And you have to trust in us as much as we trust in you all. And I ask for that. I ask that for myself. I ask that for my fellow council members. And I ask that for yourself to think about it. So I have a couple things that I just want to hand out quickly. My parents raised me to know that it's not always about me. Even when it's your birthday, you should be giving something else to somebody else because you have many things. You can only hold so many. So whenever I celebrate myself, I celebrate those who help me be who I am. Denise Martin. So most of you know her as Miss Martin. She was a principal and retired ETHS as assistant superintendent. She was my mom before she was you all's principal. First of all, best mom ever. The pink bag is because of her sorority. If you know me, blue is my color, but pink is hers. She deserves this, and it's the invitation as much as I do, because it is because of her that I'm able to be here today. And so I say, thank you, Mom. Love you, God. Bernard Harris, who does not like to have photos of himself. See, I'm going to be in trouble when I get home. Same, my dad is my dad, and because of who he is and what he contributed, he deserves this invitation as much as I do. Thank you. And the balloon is for Becky. I was going to frame my invitation for my kids, and I was like, they don't care. Not that they don't care, but they're like, yeah, Mom, whatever. You've been our mom forever, and yeah. So Romel and my daughter Alexis had to work, but it is also because of them and who they helped me become. And I wasn't the best mom. I did the best that I could, but I have the best children in the world. I like giving gifts, I really do, and I'll hurry up. Okay, thank you, I'll take it off. No, I'm just kidding. So I brought gifts for everyone that supported me, that knocked on doors, that made calls. So I have some pretzels, some chocolate, because this win for me was sweet. I picked pretzels because some people were salty about my win. So you mix the sweet and the salt, right? You combine the two, and you do what you can. So I have pretzels that they will hand out. However we're going to hand them out. We'll worry about that later. But I just want to say thank you for this journey. You stuck with me for 2 years. Then we'll see where we are then. Hopefully, as the pledge said, we'll be in a better place, collectively. I won't be there alone. Collectively, we'll do this work. So thank you all so much for all being here. Thank you. Quick photo or no? It's getting hot. I don't know who takes the photos. Yes? Right. And this is my team. This is the team that helped me do everything I had to do. This is my nephew, my niece. Come on in. Sisters, cousins. Come in. By the authority of the older person, scoot in. They'll hand them out outside, they said. Thank you. No, you give me a hug in front of everybody.
I got a text, she's like, can't wait to see what your gifts are.
If you're here, you have to come up here. We have like a lot to compete with. I feel like a balance it out a little bit.
Oh, thank you. Good Lord. All right. All right, sure.
I, Juan Hedekadis,
Having been elected to the office of council member
in the city of Evanston,
in the county of Cook aforesaid,
do solemnly affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
that I will support the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and the Constitution of the State of Illinois,
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
and that I will faithfully discharge the duties
of council member to the best of my abilities.
of council member to the best of my abilities.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
We will ever strive for the ideal and sacred things of the city,
We will forever strive for the ideal and sacred things of the city,
both alone and with many.
both alone and with many.
We will unceasingly seek to quicken
We will unceasingly seek to seek to quicken the sense of public duty.
We will revere and obey the city's laws,
We will revere and obey the city's laws,
and will transmit the city not less but greater
and will transmit the city not less but greater
and more beautiful
than when it was transmitted to us.
than when it was transmitted to us.
Thank you.
Many of you know that I really love public speaking, and I'm very long-winded. So all that I'm going to say is that being appointed to this position was a great honor, and I'm very humbled that the citizens of Evanston elected me to stay on for 2 more years, and I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilmember Reed.
Thank you. I just want to take a second to say how happy I am to continue to be joined by both Councilmember Harris and Councilmember Hedekadis. Councilmember Harris, I think you are the best chair that we have. For folks who have been able to sit through a meeting that Councilmember Harris chairs, you are on top of it. It is right to the point, and I think that's a skill that all of us could learn from. And so I really appreciate your service here. And I appreciate, while I wish I could convince you more, I appreciate that we're just able to have a dialogue and that you're a straight shooter. You tell me where you are, what your reason is. I try my best to convince you otherwise, but and I do sometimes. But you have it's always good reasoning, solid reasoning, and I just really enjoy the opportunity to have those tough dialogues with you. And I really enjoy when we get to the same place, but I always learn when we don't, and so I appreciate your service. Councilmember Hedekadis, same with you. I appreciate how open and willing you are to have conversations. When I call, you pick up the phone right away. Your call backs pretty shortly thereafter. And I can't help but recognize the importance of representation and the fact that we have the first Latinx council member in you. And I can recall working with an immigrant family and who spoke nothing but, who only spoke Spanish. My very limited Spanish was not good enough, and I was kind of frantically calling around because this was one of the migrant families from South America. And the first person that picked up the phone was Councilmember Hericares. And I said, well, you know, I'm taking my kids to school, but I can stop by your apartment in a second and we'll figure out the situation. And because of the fact that we have you on the council and because of the heart and compassion that you have, you know, that family now has a house in Rogers Park, and it's in no small part to you. And you taking time out of your day to take that family to Walmart and to all of these other places. And I can't say, you know, enough about how important it is that we have you on the council and how important the work that you do is, and just, you know, bringing forward representation that hasn't been here. So I really appreciate your service, sir. Thank you.
Clerk Mendoza.
I also want to say I feel like the luckiest person in the world because I have Councilmember Harris in my ward, and she's been super helpful always to all of her residents. But then I also want to say it's such an honor to have you, Councilmember Hericares, and I can also say that I'm glad as a Evanston resident that I have someone that I know will pick up the phone and will help families when they need to. I've, you know, heard all kinds of comments from, you know, this is not a social work agency to this is not this or this is not that. But, you know, we are here to help people. And I am thankful that you're here to help a person and that you provide this bridge with language that no one else up here can provide. And I'm very busy in my role, and I'm so glad that I have you to lean on and that everyone on this council has been super supportive of our growing population here in Evanston that speaks Spanish. And you're more than that, but you also have that experience as a person who immigrated here, a person who understands the struggle, and you can do it with the sensitivity and the, you know, give people the, you know, respect and the decency that they deserve. And thank you so much for doing that, because I wish my parents would have had that when I was growing up. And you take a huge burden away from children and children that have to take on that role. And I hope you understand how much better you're making the lives of people that can just be parents, and children don't have to be adults. And I've seen you do that time and time and time again. And I think I probably bother you like at least once a week with someone new, but you always do this, and you're a great advocate. So take that in, and thank you for doing that.
I just want to, I want to echo those words just very quickly. It's been really a joy to serve with both of you. And it's really exciting that we get to work together for 2 more years. And of all the things that I could say about the two of you and how much I've enjoyed the opportunity to work with you, the thing that I think is most important is that I know for sure that you both make me better. And I think that most people up on this dais would say that you make them better by asking good questions, by bringing up issues that otherwise wouldn't have been brought up, by pushing us in really important and healthy ways, and by teaching us things either from your own experience or from your ward that we wouldn't otherwise know about. And so I just want to say thank you for that. Maybe I don't say that often enough, but I think this is a good opportunity to say thank you for all that you do for your ward and for our whole city, but also just for making all of us more conscientious, more responsible, more thoughtful, and ultimately better at serving all of our shared constituents. We're really, really lucky to have both of you, and congratulations again. With that, we will move, the rest of our agenda will be in order. So we move now on to my public announcements and proclamations. First of all, I'm not going to read this proclamation tonight, but I want you to be aware that on Saturday, between 11:30 and 12:30, there will be some programming at the Ecology Center where we'll do, among other things, read a proclamation about our community's bird city status, and so that's something that all are enthusiastically invited to join. And then additionally, there's an Older Americans Month proclamation, and part of the city's activities was putting together what is an annual but recently skipped Aging Well conference that I had the opportunity to participate in part of on Friday morning. And I just want to thank our extraordinary team from a number of different parts of our city, but particularly our Parks and Recreation Department and Director Thompson for putting on a really important event just to connect people in the community, share resources, share ideas, and create an opportunity for us to work together on really important issues for a community that is honestly too often overlooked in our system. And so I just want to read quickly the end of the proclamation. Now, therefore, I do hereby proclaim the month of May 2023 as Older Americans Month in Evanston and urge every resident to celebrate and honor the many outstanding achievements of our senior citizens and help to create an inclusive society and accept the challenge of flexible thinking around aging. The next item on our agenda is the city manager's public announcements.
Yes, good evening, Mayor, members of City Council, Clerk Mendoza. On behalf of city staff, I would also like to congratulate Councilmember Harris and Councilmember Harkaris on their elections, and staff very much looks forward to working with you over the next couple of years. And I also wanted to highlight that this week is Public Service Recognition Week, and just want to take a brief moment to say thank you to the hardworking and dedicated city staff across our city who serve Evanston every day. It's an honor and privilege to work with these folks, and maybe we could just offer up a round of applause for our city staff. And Mr. Mayor, that concludes my remarks.
Next is communications from the city clerk.
Yes, I have an announcement. On May 11th, the governor's order that allowed virtual meetings is expiring. City council and all city board committees and commissions will be expected to meet in person in order to comply to the Open Meetings Act. Members may attend virtually. May attend by virtual means if a quorum is physically present. A majority of the body allows for the members to appear virtually, and the members not in attendance cannot attend due to a personal illness or disability, employment purposes, or family or other emergencies. Any member of a body that will not be in person is to notify the city clerk or city staff person staffing the public body of their intent to attend the meeting by virtual means. This is beginning May 11th. I also have two public comments, one from Tim. Let me get his. Brettberg. He is asking not to approve the special use ordinance 14-0-23. Asks that Councilmember Reed recuse himself, and he is in support of the good neighbor agreement put forth by the actual neighbors affected by the Margarita Inn. And that's a summary of that statement. The full summary will be available online. And by Don Ziegler, who is in support of the Margarita Inn, and Gregory Merrow, who put a comment, ordinance 14-0-23, special use for room and house in the Margarita Inn, but I do not see a support or against, but that will be available too on the website. Thank you.
This brings us to public comment for the evening. I'm warning you right now, it's going to be the whole thing. So we have exactly 60 people who have signed up. The division dictates that there ought to be then 45 seconds per person. I think in the anticipation that some may have fallen off, and also that there may be some duplicates I didn't catch between the written and digital copies, I've upped it to 50 seconds, but it's going to be the quickest one we've ever had. So I know that for some of you who are habitual public commenters, this will feel really fast. Also want to, for whatever reason, I think this was not a great handwriting day, so I'm apologizing in advance for the, I think, many names I'm going to mess up, but I will do my very best. So we begin, as always, with those who signed up on this orange sheet to speak here in person, beginning with Suzanne Calder, who will be followed by Rodney Durning and then Patty Capuche.
Good evening. I've lived in the 4th Ward for over 40 years, and I would like to just reiterate what the Mayor's Task Force on Homelessness reported to the council, is that we should move to a housing first model. The premise is that when people have a safe home and house over their heads, they are better able to deal with the issues that made them homeless. And I also, in our report, we cited an article from the American Medical Association, who had analyzed the costs to the community of an unhoused person. And the costs in 2012 were $50,000. And that included emergency visits to the hospital, 911 calls, detoxification programs. Oops, I'm over. Okay. At the same time, I'll just go real quickly, that Connections for the Homeless, which was applying a housing first model, only cost $20,000 to house someone with a case manager. So it's $20,000 versus $50,000. It's a good move.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Rodney Durning, who will be followed by Patty Capuche and then John Cleve.
Good evening, City Council. Housing is a human right. Every person should be at the Margarita Inn that's unhoused. This is inhumane. We are American citizens. Please stand with us to have these people housed so they can become productive citizens. Keep their diabetes medication in the refrigerator, get a nutritious meal, and most of all, being able to get rest. The importance of rest helps the body. We are in the United States of America. No one should be unhoused in this country. Thank you. And I'm Rodney Dawkins.
Thank you. And thank you for correcting me about your last name. The next speaker is Patty Capuche, who will be followed by John Cleve and then Beverly Reed.
Good evening to all of you. I'm going to save myself about 10 seconds by not calling you all out. So I'm Patty Capuche. I'm the Executive Director of Impact Behavioral Health Partners. Our office is located in the 8th Ward. For over 35 years, we have been providing permanent supportive housing, employment, and clinical services for adults with mental illness. The past year, we have been providing housing to families who are homeless or at risk of being homeless, and the guardian or identified parent has to have a diagnosed mental illness. Our agency has worked in partnership with Connections for many years, providing permanent housing to the most vulnerable in our community and working to find employment for their participants, including those living at the Margarita Inn who are ready to work. If I had time tonight, I could share success stories of participants who've been referred to us by Connections, who are giving shelter, resources, and hope, and remain stably housed with us to this day. Connection plays a vital role in our community, and I urge you to approve the special use permit for the Margarita Inn. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is John Cleve, who will be followed by Beverly Reed and then Phyllis Nickel.
Hello. Well, I'm going to jump right to it because you've seen me here before. I've been a one-horse, one-trick pony. It's the operating agreement. That is everything on this. That's all that I've been after for the past year, is to have one that gives us objective standards so that we can make sure that nothing bad happens for the city and for the residents that are inside. You guys hired Dan Lauber a couple weeks ago, who's a national expert, has done this dozens of times. He gave the city I haven't seen it yet because, unfortunately, the city's slow on the FOIA, but he gave us a draft, right? Luke, you had gotten a draft. You got it 99% of it. Other than adding insurance, there's still no stipulations about staffing. There's no stipulations about the ingress and egress about any kind of enforcement. It's the whole reason I didn't sign the Good Neighbor Agreement, because there's no enforcement. And this one I was hoping would have that. So, Jonathan, you gave 12 points to Camille for the hotel across the street. So why isn't this hotel have a similar thing? So please reconsider the signed operating agreement. I mean, that's the one thing the city has. Good word.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Beverly Reed, who will be followed by Phyllis Nickel and then Katie Eigen.
Did you say Rosalie Regal?
Not yet. I said Beverly Reed is next.
I didn't hear the name.
The name is Beverly Reed. If in that case, the next speaker will be Phyllis Nickel, who will be followed by Katie Eigen and then Jean Combs.
I'm Phyllis Nickel, a 6th Ward resident, 45 years here in Evanston, and I'm a long-term member of Lake Street Church. Very familiar with the work of Connections. I'm also a social worker, but Connections originated 40 years ago at Lake Street Church. We're extremely proud of the work that they do, their operations. They have a national reputation for following the best practices of Housing First and being successful, exemplified by moving 70% of Margarita Inn residents to permanent housing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Katie Eigen, who will be followed by Jean Combs and then Laura Harris first.
Good evening. My name is Katie Egan, and I am the Continuum of Care Planning Director at the Alliance to End Homelessness in suburban Cook County. The Alliance is designated by HUD as the lead agency for the Cook County Continuum of Care, and as such, we are the planning body responsible for designing and implementing a strategic plan to prevent and end homelessness in all 130 suburbs outside the city of Chicago. Connections for the Homeless has been a COC, a Continuum of Care member agency, since our founding nearly 2 decades ago, and plays a vital role in our COC strategic plan by contributing their vast experience and expertise. Connections has been selected by HUD to provide housing and services to those experiencing homelessness in recognition of their demonstrated leadership and commitment to and implementation of national best practices. As a Continuum of Care, we have identified a need for at least 185 shelter beds. As such, would be provided by the Margarita Inn.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Jean Combs, followed by Laura Harris-Ferree, and then Bernadette Burke.
I'm here to assure you that Connections is doing an excellent and necessary job in all of its services and at the Margarita Inn. I'm a practicing psychiatrist for 48 years, and in that 48 years, I have seen the steady erosion of the social safety nets in this country, and more people having to come to me as if their problems are psychiatric problems, when their problems are poverty, and when their problems are lack of support. Connections is doing state-of-the-art work in supporting people who have been deprived of the basics of humanity. And certain members of our community are wanting to pathologize and criminalize the poverty that we're trying to help. I urge you not to listen to that.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Laura Harris-Ferree, who will be followed by Bernadette Burke and then Emma Greer.
Good evening. My name is Pastor Laura Harris-Ferree. I am the pastor at Grace Lutheran Church in South Evanston. This is the worst and most incompetent management company I have ever dealt with. My first neighbor was selling narcotics out of his apartment. This is one of the worst companies that I ever rented from. They do absolutely nothing to maintain their property, from rats to roaches to lots of mold. If I could give a -10, I would. You might assume I'm reading comments about the Margarita Inn, but in fact, those were reviews about the landlords and their properties on either side of the Margarita Inn. Here are some of the comments shared by the residents of the Margarita Inn. I am very thankful. I feel comfortable and supported at the Margarita Inn. If I have a problem I can't solve, I talk to a counselor. If I'm hungry, they find me food. Jesus said a lot about giving food to the hungry, housing the homeless, and feeding the poor. And so I hope we will take those same words that Jesus urges us to do and do the same for the Margarita Inn folks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Bernadette Burke, who will be followed by Emma Greer, and then Dennis Pierce.
My name is Bernadette Burke, and I am the president of Breller Productions, located directly across from the proposed Fifth Ward School. We've been in the ward for 17 years. While I support a Fifth Ward elementary school, I'm here to oppose the current design and required zoning variances because they put an undue problem on the business community. The business community's concerns have not been addressed by the school district. We beg that the school board, that the council please ask some questions from the business community because they have not yet been addressed. We really want a Fifth Ward school. We really want a K through 5 school. We don't need a K through 8. We don't need to have a magnet school that will be twice the size of every other elementary school in the district. Please address the business district's needs. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Emma Greer, followed by Dennis Pierce, and then Annette Rosier.
Hi, I'm Emma Greer, and I'm 18 and have lived in Evanston my entire life. My family has volunteered and supported Connections for as long as I can remember. I'm here today not only to advocate for Connections, but also to advocate for all the children and teens in Evanston that have had to face homelessness. 70% of chronically homeless adults experienced homelessness as a child. On any given day, there may be as many as 200 homeless students at ETHS. That means 140 of my peers today are likely to become chronically homeless if we don't find them housing security now. Last year alone, Connections prevented 250 children from being evicted from their homes and found stable housing for another 100 homeless children. Since opening in 2020, the Margarita Inn has served 48 children and 18 young adults. I urge you tonight, on behalf of Evanston's homeless children and teens, some of which who are my friends, to please let the Margarita Inn keep doing its necessary work. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Dennis Pierce, who will be followed by Annette Rosier, and then Dan Cox.
Mr. Mayor and council members, my name is Dennis Pierce. I'm a member of the 4th Ward. I've lived there for 50 years. I live 3 blocks from the Margarita Inn. I've never seen a problem with the Margarita Inn as far as people causing concerns or acting unreasonably. I support the Margarita Inn, and I ask this question. If you don't issue a permit, what will the city of Evanston do with these homeless people? It's a city problem. It's a community problem. And the city needs to take responsibility, it seems, for that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Annette Rosier, who will be followed by Dan Cox, and then Joshua Hauser.
Good evening, Council. My name is Annette Rosier, and I live in the 8th Ward on Morford Street since 2014. And I'm a member of Lake Street Church and an occasional volunteer with Interfaith Action. I've been familiar with the work of the Connection for over 18 years now. And talking to clients and talking to people who work there and work with the Connection, I've heard nothing but good. The first time I heard any complaints was when it came to the issue of the special permit. I regard them as very professional, very competent, very humane, and I personally benefited from the Margarita Inn because the Connection literally took off a previous neighbor whom I had to house, who had no place to go. He was mentally ill. They took him off my hands, they housed him, and they gave him a house to live and a home to live. One of the 70% they were able to house. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Dan Cox, followed by Josh Hauser, and then Mark Melchak.
Good evening, Council. I'm a 12-year Evanstonian. I live 5 blocks from the Margarita Inn. I'm also a board member of Connections for the Homeless. The reason I am in favor of the Margarita Inn is because I feel like it's homelessness that's actually on the docket. I feel like if you were to ask everybody in the room here, everybody would be opposed to homelessness. But the fact of the matter is that the Department of Housing and Urban Development has estimated that there are 30% more unsheltered homeless than there were pre-pandemic. So when we're talking about supporting the Margarita Inn, we're talking about Evanston having a resource and something that's been remarkably effective at turning unsheltered homeless into having secure housing that's permanent. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Joshua Hauser, followed by Mark Melchak, and then Paul Khalil.
Thank you. My name is Joshua Hauser. I'm a palliative care physician and an internist at Northwestern and the Jesse Brown VA. I'm an Evanston resident, and I speak in support of Connections and the Margarita Inn. I volunteered providing homeless care for the last 25 years, initially in Boston and now in Chicago, in the last 15 years at Connections. As a volunteer physician, I work alongside a dedicated group of staff at Connections. I'm intermittent, and they're the glue that keeps the place together. And they do so with grace and grit and a steady focus on their clients and the safety of the community. It won't surprise you that the clients whom I meet have the same problems that all of us have: a cough, a cut, a runny nose, someone to talk to. And it will also not surprise you that they are some of the kindest, most resilient, and generous people I've had the privilege to serve as a physician. They are not perfect, but neither am I. And I think one of the best ways we can help them is our continued support for the Margarita Inn and Connections for the Homeless. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mark Melchak, who will be followed by Paul Khalil, and then Ellen King.
My name is Mark Melchak, co-owner of the 1601-1607 Simpson Street property across from the proposed Fifth Ward School. I oppose the variances requested for the Fifth Ward School due to the impact on the residences and businesses around the school. I support a smaller Fifth Ward school, K through 5 only, 300 students versus 900 fitting into one square block, catering only to the Fifth Ward. Why bus in Bessie Road students to the Fifth Ward and create new challenges? I know this will pass, but ask the district and architects to engage the community much more than they have. The neighborhood north of the property already has severe parking challenges for employees, customers, and area residents. If we allow as proposed the removal of 50 parking spots from Simpson and Ashland, we will only have 4% parking availability, not the suggested or required 15%. If a 20% reduction occurred in downtown Evanston or on Central or Dempster or Maine, this would not pass without a lot more discussion. Please do not let this project move forward until these significant issues have been addressed. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Paul Khalil, who will be followed by Ellen King, and then Stephen Hackney.
Hi, I'm Paul Khalil. I live about 5 blocks away from the Margarita Inn, and I'm the president of Connections for the Homeless. The board of directors of Connections is comprised of volunteers who live in Evanston, who love Evanston, and who care deeply about ending homelessness. Connections is an organization that utilizes best practices, that is a well-run organization, that serves thousands of Evanstonians each year, and is a true leader in the field. And the Margarita Inn helps to address one of the key drivers of homelessness, the fact that there are not enough places for people to sleep and live affordably in Evanston. The Margarita Inn is highly effective and gets people into stable housing at a rate that's almost double the national average. The cost of not doing this or of delaying this is lives lost, is hope lost. The difference between doing this and not doing this could be the roof over somebody's head through the winter or life or death. We're an organization with a 4-decade history of success and effectiveness in Evanston, and we're offering a meaningful solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ellen King, who will be followed by Stephen Hackney, and then Rosalie Riegel. Is Ellen King not here? In that case, we'll move ahead with Stephen Hackney, followed by Rosalie Riegel, and then Elena Navas.
Good evening. My name is Stephen Hackney, and I'm both an Evanston resident and a member of the Board of Directors of Connections for the Homeless. And I'm here to convey one simple point that I want to make sure doesn't get lost in the debate. The Margarita Inn reduces homelessness in Evanston. Frustrating this project will increase homelessness in Evanston. There is not a person here tonight, nor a person out on the streets of Evanston that wants to see the problem of homelessness in Evanston get worse. The best part of the story is that the Margarita Inn is free to the city of Evanston. It costs the budget not 1 cent. So when you have a solution that is free to the city, that reduces homelessness, you know what happens? Hundreds of Evanstonians come out in purple t-shirts in support of an obviously good public policy. There are a lot of tough decisions that come across your desk. This isn't one of them. I'd urge you to vote in favor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Rosalie Riegel, who will be followed by Elena Navas and then Ben Klitsky.
I'm Rosalie Riegel. I live around the corner from the Margarita Inn, and from my windows I can see their parking lot. Tonight, I'm speaking for the St. John the 23rd Catholic Parish Peace and Justice Committee. The churches are St. Mary and St. Nicholas. We in the Peace and Justice Committee tried to learn from Dorothy Day, co-founder of the Catholic Worker, known for her unstinting hospitality to unhoused people. Following her teachings, we wholeheartedly support the Connections for the Homeless project at the Margarita Inn. Research shows that safe housing significantly improves the health and well-being of formerly unhoused people. And we know how wonderful Connections has been in addressing homelessness in Evanston. We are confident that they will comply with any rulings of the City Council and its Land Use Commission make in granting them permission to continue their work at the Margarita Inn. We urge the City Council to ensure Connections for the Homeless continues their good work. Sincerely yours, St. John the 23rd Catholic Parish Peace and Justice Committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Elena Navas, who will be followed by Ben Klitsky and then Paul Klitsky.
Good evening. My name is Elena Navas. I am a board member of Connections, a resident of Evanston, and a public health professor and researcher. I think the homelessness prevention work that Connections has been doing for the last 40 years is critical for the city of Evanston, our community, and the underserved populations, including new immigrants, that we are now in charge of giving housing and protecting. Just in the last year, Connections has prevented 647 Evanstonians, 280 households, and 240 children from losing their homes. As in health, any health condition, as you well know, the most cost-effective way to deal with homelessness is through prevention. And if you add the numbers up based on what it costs to, the estimates of the cost of, public expense, we're talking about between $20 and $30 million. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ben Klitsky, who will be followed by Paul Klitsky and then Christina Joyce.
Good evening, Council. My name is Ben Klitsky. I'm the Director of Maintenance Operations at Nature's Perspective Landscaping. We're a second ward business, and I'm a second ward resident. I'm here today and tonight to voice my support for adjusting the hours for the electric leaf blowers. We've gone over a lot of hurdles to make it work, and it is noticeably more quiet in town. I think it is. Our guys are getting thumbs up from random strangers using the electric blowers. And so I greatly appreciate the council trying to work with us. I think that the next step with this is to partner up, gaining legitimacy for this ordinance by a bigger landscape contractor in the city is going to be a good big first step to really having more municipalities embrace this. And I appreciate your consideration of changing those hours to the construction times so we are able to get our work done, especially come the fall when there's going to be more days like today. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Paul Klitsky, who will be followed by Christina Joyce and then Michael Joyce.
Good evening, City Council. My name is Paul Klitsky, and I'm the General Manager of Nature's Perspective Landscaping, located in Evanston's beautiful West End District in the 2nd Ward. I'm here tonight to ask the City Council to reconsider the Fair Work Week ordinance and exempt the landscape industry from it. Our employees' livelihoods and compensation has always been one of the most important things for us as employers, and I don't really believe that you guys maybe understand the unique nature of our industry. Number one, we work outdoors. and doing so puts our work schedule completely at the mercy of Mother Nature. As many of you know, the weather is extremely hard to predict here in the Chicagoland area. I mean, just ask a meteorologist. Unless the city council can provide me with a 100% accurate weather forecast for the next 14 days, we won't be able to conform to this. So please reconsider and exempt the landscape industry from this ordinance. I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Christina Joyce, who will be followed by Michael Joyce and then Catherine Bunton. Is Christina Joyce here? Seeing not, we'll move ahead with Michael Joyce, who will be followed by Catherine Bunton, and then James Gibbs. Is Michael Joyce here? If not, we'll move ahead then with Catherine Bunton, who will be followed by James Gibbs, and then Bill Hartgering.
Hi, I just have a couple of things I'd like to share about the Margarita Inn. I moved back to Evanston a year ago from Wilmette because I really like living in a community that is this diverse and pretty progressive and caring. As a public health professional, I'm grateful that Evanston has connections to provide the services that are needed by the homeless population. It's been said that a civilized society cares for its young, its old, and its infirmed, its needy. So I'm very happy if we affirm the Margarita Inn for homeless individuals. It's just the right thing to do. I live at Oaken Lake, and I welcome this beautiful building being used for the benefit of needy individuals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is James Gibbs, who will be followed by Bill Hartgering and then Mary Beth Schroeder.
I'm James Gibbs, 8th Ward. I've been an Evanston resident for almost 50 years. It was a surprise to me that I was speaking tonight. So nevertheless, I've come up and I want to say that I enthusiastically support the Margarita. That's it.
Thank you very much. I hope I read that name correctly. It looks like James Gibbs, certainly. If not, my apologies. The next speaker will be Bill Hartgering, followed by Mary Beth Schroeder, and then, if she's still here, Dana Waldrop.
Very good pronunciation. My name is Bill Hartgering. I've been a resident of Evanston for about 46 years in 3 wards. And I've been on the Board of Connections twice. I'm not on it now. That was twice over the last probably 20 years. This city wants to end homelessness. I don't think there's any question about that. That involves housing, and that involves providing service to those in the housing. Connections provides those services. But we could not create, this city could not create, Connections could not create a place like the Margarita Inn. We have an opportunity now, as was pointed out. The city doesn't have to pay for that. It's simply, what the inn simply provides is an opportunity to do what the city wants. Make it happen.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mary Beth Schroeder.
Thank you, Alderman, Mayor Biss, and Clerk Mendoza. My name is Mary Beth Schroeder. I've lived here 31 and a half years, and for about 25 of those, I've been involved in the nonprofit world and public service, and I have facilitated or been part of groups dozens, if not hundreds of times, envisioning what are Evanston's challenges and what do we dream of. And I promise you, in every single one of them, housing has been number 1 or number 2. There have been a gazillion task forces over the years. We talk and talk and talk. We have a real solution. It's a wonderful solution. So I urge you not to let some mythical perfect image get in the way of something that's really, really, really good. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This concludes the the reading of those who signed up on this sheet. Again, there's lots of people signed up online to speak here. I know you get mad every time. I promise. All the people who signed up online will get called too. But before I go to them, I want to reread the names of those who I called and didn't respond, just in case they've now arrived. Beverly Reed, Ellen King, Christina Joyce, and Michael Joyce. Are any of those four individuals here and prepared to give public comments? Seeing not, we now move on to those who signed up online to speak in person, beginning with Lisa Delantoni, followed by Eric Passett, and then Jeremy Venata. Is Ms. Delantoni here? Looks like not, so we'll move on with Eric Passett, followed by Jeremy Venata, and then Beth Adler.
I'm Eric Passett. I'm a citizen of the 4th Ward and also the owner of North Shore Apartments and Condos. And I guess two things I want to bring up is, as part of being a landlord, we have to follow, the city ordinances. I have to say, and we get cited, I wouldn't say all the time, but it does happen. If we ran our buildings like Connections for the Homeless runs theirs, we would have been shut down a long time ago. Guaranteed. Second thing is, at the first Land Use Commission meeting, at least 3 Land Use Commissioners spoke up against how they feel, about the negative impact on, they were worried about the negative impact from Margarita Inn. Right after that, we found out, 2 days later, that they're going to add 25 beds to Hilda's place? That didn't happen by mistake. That takes 3 months to get that application. So how can we trust them? My point. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Jeremy Venata, followed by Beth Adler, and then Joe Kujawinski.
Hi, Jeremy Venata, Evanston, 1st Ward resident for 23 years. Hearing is the one sense we can't turn off. I hope you hear the voices showing up today. As you know, it's far more common to hear the voice of the vocal minority who says, "Not in my backyard." Here we have an overwhelming majority standing up to say yes. Put Connections in the Margarita Inn, in our backyard. For all the reasons previously espoused, I urge you to trust the history and present great work of Connections for the Homeless. Do not let perfect defeat the opportunity for wonderful. Hear now this overflowing and overwhelming preponderance of community support. And for those who ran for council, who wanted to help the least secure and most vulnerable among us, please listen and vote yes. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Beth Adler, who will be followed by Joe Kujawinski, and then Rose Shapiro.
Hello, members of the City Council and Mayor Biss. While I fully support the efforts of Connections for the Homeless in their efforts with the Margarita Inn, I'm here to speak on another topic, the Evanston Thrives plan for reinvigorating our business district. My husband and I own a mixed-use commercial residential building at Florence and Crane that houses several small arts-focused business. We in the West Village are very pleased to have retained our designation as a separate district under the new Evanston Thrives plan. West Village is unique commercial and residential area in the city with a plethora of small artisanal shops, artist studios, and galleries that draws folks from all over Evanston and the greater Chicago area. Since the pandemic, our commercial areas in Evanston have suffered, and I appreciated that the city committed $150,000 to a master plan for revising those districts. The Evanston Thrives report recommends 4 critical ways. I look forward to seeing the impact that this study moves beyond these recommendations, which we've seen before, into substantive action that makes a positive impact for all business districts. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Joe Kujawinski, who will be followed by Rose Shapiro, and then Susan Hammer.
Hi, my name is Joe Kujawinski, and thanks for letting me speak tonight. I come not only for myself, but with my neighbors at 1020. We really support wholeheartedly having the Margarita Inn in our neighborhood. It's about a half a block from us. We feel like that we've heard a lot of things about how there's panhandling, there's other problems, but we live in the neighborhood, we walk our dogs, and we don't see any of that. So we really think that it's a good move to have Margarita Inn there. Sometimes it reminds me of that old acronym, NIMBY, not in my backyard, because it seems like so many people say they support the homeless and they want something done, but not in their backyard. We would like it in our, actually, front yard. So please, I ask all of you to think seriously about voting yes.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Rose Shapiro, who will be followed by Susan Hammer, and then Ann Weatherhead.
Hi, good evening. I'm here on behalf of the over 800 members of the Jewish Council on Urban Affairs, JCUA, who live or work in Evanston to express resounding support of the special use permit for Connections at the Margarita Inn. JCUA has partnered with this project because this facility already has had an incredible impact on some of the most vulnerable members of the Evanston community and is a model for cities across the country. They use best practices to address and resolve homelessness, to care for our homeless neighbors, and this is a great asset for all of the residents of Evanston. I urge you to approve this permit. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Susan Hammer, who will be followed by Ann Weatherhead, and then we'll move on to video comment. Susan Hammer.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Susan Hammer. I've lived in Evanston for over 2 decades. I'm a member of the Women's Club of Evanston, and I'm also a proud staff member of Connections for the Homeless. I'm honored to be part of this organization that works to solve the problems of homelessness. But it saddens me as a member of this community to hear the untruths being spread by those who don't care to learn the facts about the work we do. Connections has a 70% success rate in finding housing solutions. Connections' success comes from their almost 40 years of doing this work. They are experts, and they need to be part of the solution in Evanston. Please let them be that solution. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Ann Weatherhead.
I'm Ann Weatherhead. I live in the First Ward, but just a few blocks from the Margarita Inn. I'm a regular volunteer and supporter of Connections for the Homeless. I serve on the Joining Forces for Affordable Housing Working Committee, where we do a lot of advocacy work for the homeless and for affordable housing. We've heard a lot here. I want to just mention something that hasn't been talked about, the Good Neighbor Agreement. This was developed by a group of people who was brought together, and it was signed by Mayor Biss and Betty Bogg. Unfortunately, many people who speak out in opposition to the Margarita Inn did not participate in those discussions. Rather, they came up with their own agreement that is different from what Connections had. I urge you very much to think about working together and let's work this out together as opposed to continuing to oppose it and come out against everything Connections stands for. And just the last thing, without the services of Connections, where would we be? More people on the street? Is this the community we want to have? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe that concludes the entire in-person portion of this evening's public comment. So we'll now move to those who signed up to speak online, beginning with Meg Welch, who will be followed by Tony Ray, and then Keith Banks.
So I won't be going on camera, but I'm Meg Welch. I'm a Fourth Ward property owner, currently living just outside San Francisco. I support solutions for the homeless. Being opposed to homelessness does not require you to vote in support of this special use permit. It is said that with the housing first approach, people can better deal with other issues in their life if they're housed. That does not mean they will in actuality be able to deal with the other issues without appropriate wraparound assistance that help them take the steps to grow for long-term independence. I'm asking you to think long-term consequences and do not rush into action on SB 3 tonight. or act on fear of being name-called, or out of a desire for a feel-good solution that will allow us to feel virtuous. All projects are not advisable for a particular community at a particular time simply because they're labeled affordable housing or homeless housing.
Thank you very
The devil is in
much.
the details. And I question if those commenting today on behalf of their churches are aware of the details.
Thank
I'm
you very
asking you to
much.
see what's possible in terms of what we can provide to clients to meet their needs for long-term outcome by consulting with organizations who might do
Thank-
things a bit differently than Connections. There's a
Thank you
Franciscan
very much, Ms.
organization in
Welch.
Chicago that has 60 years experience of providing
Thank you.
this. Also, my family
the next-
was very involved in the Catholic worker movement, and they are so much more than putting.
The next speaker will be Tony Ray, who will be followed by Keith Banks, and then Mary Rosinski. And just for the rest of the online public comment, I know that sometimes my instinct for politeness can make it hard for me to speak as loudly as I perhaps should in cutting you off, but it's a really short window today, and in the interest of fairness, I'm going to have to cut off the public comment. The online people in much the same way that the in-person people were not given meaningful additional time. So we'll all do our best together. Tony Ray.
I'm Tony Ray. I live at 1020 Grove, a scant half block away from the Margarita. I'm going to be very short. I'm a big walker. You've probably seen me walking around here. I've never seen anyone outside the Margarita Inn causing any trouble, and I'm a great supporter. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Keith Banks, who will be followed by Mary Rosinski and then Tina Payton.
I'm Keith Banks, 28-year resident, Second Ward resident of Evanston, Illinois. I'm also the executive director for the Reba Place Development Corporation. For the last 3 decades, we provided affordable housing for low-income families, and we do a range of co-ops, condos, and apartments. We have, for the last 5 years, worked with Connections directly via our connection with the Evanston Lighthouse Rotary Club, which we're fighting the big fight of housing insecurity, and we've been working together collaboratively, a strong network of support with joining forces. And I just want to say that we're part of that solution in helping this 70% get out of temporary housing, because many families have come to our affordable co-ops and rentals that we've been able to house. And I tell you, there's
Thank you very much.
Seeing children and parents have their own permanent housing, you know, the smiles on their faces, going from a one-space unit to having, you know, a kitchen, a bathroom.
Thank you very much, Mr. Banks.
You know, so I urge you to support this project. I'm all in. I hope you're all in.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Mary Rosinski, who will be followed by Tina Payton and then Austin Hall.
Hi, thank you. I also support, solutions to homelessness, but I do question the passing of this before there's the devil in the details with the operating agreement. I'm hoping that maybe Mr. Lober will be here tonight so that we can talk to him about that. I'm concerned about the staffing as I read through. There'll be 2 employees at 24 hours, but at night, if something comes up, are those employees 18-year-olds? Are they 20-year-olds? How trained are they? I mean, I have a daughter who's an EMT, but at 22 years old, if something serious came up, would that be the type of person that can handle anything that happens? I have a friend that runs a sober house out in Northbrook, and I know they have people there that are trained CNNs and social workers working with people. It's a very successful program. So I'm really concerned about the devil in the detail of the operating agreement, not opposed to a homeless shelter on that point. So I would hope that we have a thorough discussion on that. That's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Tina Payton, who will be followed by Austin Hall and then Darlene Cannon.
Good evening. Broken promises and double standards. 1.5 years later, my business is still devastated by 2 Connections for the Homeless clients who resided at my apartment building through the Rapid Rehousing Program. Their reign of terror has cost me $50,000 plus in property damage, lost incomes, and a vacant building that could be housing other families in need. If Connections could not control their clients' behavior, shooting bullets in my building and almost killing my tenants, car towed for homicide investigations, damaging property and threatening the landlords, inviting wanted subjects to live on their property, on my property, how will they manage up to 60 people in the Margarita Inn with staff that used to be on the program themselves and are not licensed psychologists or professionals to run the facilities? Where are you, Mayor? Where are
Thank you very much.
Connections? And where are all the people that have just spoke for Connections? You didn't help me. Black Lives Matter all the time, and not just by using them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Austin Hall, who will be followed by Darlene Cannon and then Tricia Connolly.
My name is Austin Hall. I'm the owner of Greenwise Organic Lawn Care, which has been a proud Evanston-based business for 16 years. I too support the exemption of landscapers from the Fair Workweek Ordinance. Our employees' well-being is of the highest importance to us, but it's simply not practical for us to comply with the proposed ordinance given the nature of our business. As was stated before, landscapers operate outdoors. Inclement weather means that we must delay or postpone our operations from time to time, so we don't have the ability to easily provide 14-day notice to our employees for scheduled changes. The City of Chicago excluded landscapers from the Fair Workweek Ordinance in the city, and I think for good reason, and I ask the City Council to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Darlene Cannon, who will be followed by Tricia Connolly.
Darlene Cannon, Second Ward. I am wondering, why are we using Johnson's consulting firm pertaining to the economic impact study for Ryan Field? They're a realtor firm, and there seems to be a lack of community input, transparency, and of course, accountability. And as far as Boulder's contracts for the water main improvements, resurfacing, why are we using a company that can't adhere to our MWB goals? Why would we have goals and guidelines if we're unwilling to follow them? I'm in support of providing our small businesses with financial support via ARPA funds. Many of our beloved businesses are struggling to stay afloat after the pandemic. So we need to make sure that our longtime businesses are supported. I'm also in support of keeping the West End Village and the Dempster Dodge business districts intact.
Thank you very much.
These business districts are striving, and there's no reason to mix them in with anything else. And I think it is also very shameful that we're not helping Miss Payton after a whole year of her property being damaged.
Thank you very much. The next speaker is Tricia Connolly.
Hello, Tricia Connolly, Second Ward. My remarks tonight really speak to advocacy, and what does that advocacy look like by our elected leaders here at the City of Evanston in regard to the Margarita Inn, as well as other living facilities in our town. What are we as a city doing to make sure that the community members that live in these various types of housing have the advocacy from someone outside of those organizations so that they can feel the level of safety to speak when there are issues they are facing within these various places? That includes the Housing Authority of Cook County, that includes the Margarita Inn, that includes the Claridge, and all others. How are they going to seek support? And this should have already been in place, but I think this has been elevated at this point as a concern, and we'd all like to know how that plans to be addressed. We also
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry?
Your time is up.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. This ends public comment for the evening and brings us now to special orders of business, one of which has already been handled. So we go now to item SP2. Would someone care to make a motion relative to item SP2?
I will move item SP2, approval of the Evanston Thrives Retail District Action Plan.
Second.
I just want to ask a clarification. If you there's 3 items recommended in here. Are you making a motion for all 3?
Yes, I will make that motion, and we can move things around as we see fit.
All right. Councilmember Reed moves that the City Council adopt and place on file the Evanston Thrives report, that we allocate $3 million from the American Rescue Plan Act funds for initial implementation of the Evanston Thrives report, and that we authorize the city manager to hire an additional employee in the Economic Development Division. Councilmember Harris seconds. I believe we have a presentation.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, City Clerk Mendoza, members of the City Council. Once again, my name is Paul Zamazak. I serve as the Community's Economic Development Manager. I'm very pleased to be here tonight to briefly introduce our consulting team, who's been at the helm for almost a year working on Evanston Thrives. I am not going to take any more time at the microphone. I'm going to ask Sarah Kellerman and Marisa Schultz to step forward and provide a brief presentation. Thank you.
We don't have the slides up? Oh, okay. Well, I guess since we have just a second before we start, is Evanston Now, is anyone from Evanston Now here tonight? Anyone?
Don't.
You're usually online. Okay, well, I put myself together a little bit better tonight. I'm hoping for a better screenshot. Let's work together to get this done. Thank you. Last one was awful. Well, we are here to talk about Evanston Thrives. A little background before the slides come up. We've been working on this plan with Paul and his team and so many of you on council and so many of the business owners of Evanston, so much feedback from the public. It's been a really amazing experience. We feel like we've had really wonderful engagement throughout. We started the process about a year ago. We've used a few different tools along the way, focus groups, a public survey, but lots of different ways and means to try to get a pulse on what are the challenges facing the business community in Evanston today, what is Evanston's real market position in the region, individual business districts, how are they competing among each other and among other districts in the region. And this report is sort of the culmination of recommendations that respond to all of the listing that we did early in the process. So let's see, do I have control of this? So I'm Sarah Kellerman. I'm with Interface Studio. This is Marisa Schultz. She's with Altogether Studio. We've been partnering on this, not represented here today as the rest of our respective teams, as well as MJB Consulting. He's a retail and economics expert, as well as Kevin Hively with Ninegrat Partners, and he is also in market and economics, and both of them were heavily involved along the way in shaping this plan as well. Let's get the full screen. Okay, well, this is fine. So I'm here to offer the full plan document in all of its 156-page glory. So I know that we're challenged in time tonight. There's a lot on this agenda, and I want to, provide what you guys need and answer any questions that you have. But we'll just do a really quick orientation to sort of what is included in the document and the organization of it. But again, I just want to reiterate, we had so many people participate in the creation of this plan. Task force members, the business community is a busy bunch, and the fact that they met with us with some regularity to talk and work through these issues and have conversations, really deep conversations, over, physically around a table with us to help craft some of these recommendations. That's so meaningful to the process. We did walk and talks with Councilman Reed, Councilman Burns. I mean, just so much engagement went into this, and we're very proud of the product. And we hope that it's our ultimate hope that it is a useful tool for the city in the future. So our charge was to look at each of Evanston's retail districts as individual districts and as a whole to evaluate their market position in the region and to look at sort of the larger retail ecosystem and its supporting infrastructure. And that's exactly what we did. So what came together at the end as an end product is a document that's organized into 5 sections with the addition of an introduction. But the 5 primary sections of the plan are business supports, events and programming, tenanting and attraction, marketing, and then placemaking. Within each of these sections, we do a deep dive. Like I said, lots of pages, very deep and very broad, but all organized similarly around recommendations followed by actions. In the full plan document, the bullets that you see, go back up, the bullets that you see are incremental steps towards the actions. We also offer the executive summary, which has the summarized version of the actions with a prioritization, so indicating what we were calling priority actions. And what that means, what the word priority, the way that we're using it in this context is, these are the things that we feel will have a big or a catalytic impact if implemented, or they are sort of an essential first domino to fall in the order of things to come in the implementation of the plan. With a lot of the recommendations, they're also paired with case studies or examples of how some of these proposed projects and ideas were implemented other places. All working towards the ultimate goal of shifting this scale. We want to enable Paul's team, the Economic Development Division, to shift their focus to more proactive actions, to do more business education, to grow the sponsor pool, to initiate more public-private partnership projects. Right now, it's our evaluation that you're acting in a reactive space. It's a lot of the day-to-day operations, and so a lot of the recommendations are about how to make that shift, where you need to collect more data, where you can initiate different processes, retool policies to enable a more proactive approach. We also know that one huge focus of this plan is to help inform and prioritize the spending of the remaining ARPA funds. We hope that embedded in the plan, there are lots of ideas for how to invest these monies across the districts. Some tactical, some bigger vision projects. Lots of different ways that they would sort of take form, but all for the ultimate goal of activating Evanston's retail districts, public spaces, and bringing a new life and a new energy to these retail districts and downtown. We also offer recommendations to enact policies that encourage or incentivize access for small, local, and legacy businesses. We offer suites of options. It's everything that we put into the plan we think could work for Evanston, but this is where we offer the plan to you to move forwards into implementation. So lots of pros and cons, lots of different options on the table. And the second to last and very important piece through this process is that we present an umbrella brand for the collective experience of Evanston. And what we're trying to do is not only offer this overarching Enjoy Evanston brand, but also offer how it can represent or represent the unique identities of each district and how it can all relate and live together and be legible and cohesive and understandable for visitors, and also represent that pride of place that so many Evanstonians have. And the last thing that we really are trying to communicate through this plan is the value of investing in placemaking. We hope that one of the really important things to communicate through all of these ideas and projects and all of the sections of the plan is that placemaking is not frivolous. It is a core city function, and it is essential to economic development in Evanston. It's a public expectation that retail districts and destinations in a place are exciting and are offering an experience. And so a lot of what we're offering through this plan is working towards that goal. To that end, I think one of the showpieces of this plan is each individual district that we looked at, so that's downtown and all of the 7 other districts that we did a deep dive into. We provide a placemaking plan for each of those districts that includes ideas that are meant to show what could be done with some leftover spaces, different ways to activate, all under a placemaking strategy that's place specific. So each of the individual districts has a slightly different slant, slightly different approach to placemaking, the purpose, and that's tied very closely to the market strength that we identified for each of the areas. So in some places it's about using leftover spaces or creating, something that knits together different destinations. Here you see a recommendation for the Ashland Arts area, Hill Arts, proposed name Ashland Arts, but in this section, the examples are really working towards building off of the known developments coming to this area. So this is where the Fifth Ward School and the Twig Skate Park. So how can the retail district benefit most from these other catalytic investments in this area? And how can we knit them together? That's sort of the focus in that section. For example, in Noyes and in West End and in Church and Dodge, all of these places have different identities. They all have different things that make them special, and we wanted to bring those to the surface, really celebrate them, and show a placemaking plan that was specific to each of these areas with a huge menu of ideas and options that were born of this process that you can take forward into implementation, hopefully apply some of the ARPA funds towards getting some of these exciting projects off the ground. So again, there's a huge amount in this plan. Even in the placemaking district plans, there are marketing, public space, and market and development recommendations. So recommendations on recommendations. There's a lot to do. But ultimately, we hope it's a really useful tool. We had a blast working with you all, and we really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Any discussion? We begin with Councilmember Reed.
Turn my light off, but I'll kick us off here. One, I really I appreciate all the work that you all have put into this and the thoroughness. Many of us have gotten the opportunity to hear this presentation a number of times and in even more depth than you provided today at economic development, at ward meetings. I made the motion. I am supportive of moving forward with the three recommendations that are here. I think it makes perfect sense. We need to bolster Paul's department. We used to fund that department using our hotel motel tax, and we no longer do that. And I think moving forward, yes, $3 million will be a nice, beginning to implementing some of this plan, but it's not going to get us very far. And I think one of the questions that we as a body really have to look at if we are going to be serious about implementing this plan and not taking all of the work that the team did and just placing it on a shelf and maybe implementing a few things, or 20 years down the line saying that, So I think we need to really focus on moving forward, looking at how do we get revenue into, similar to our CARP and other pots of money, how do we get money into a pot that is dedicated to ensuring that particularly our small and medium-sized businesses have what they need to thrive here in Evanston. And so I've put forward a occupational privilege tax on large businesses for employees that don't live in Evanston. That could bring in hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. It's something that these large businesses are used to paying in many communities across the nation, and this could give us the money that we need to support these efforts moving forward on an ongoing basis. And so while I'm excited to have this plan and to be able to move forward with some of the three basics here, if we are going to really get the most bang for our buck that we spent on this plan and the time that many of us spent working on this, primarily the team, we're going to have to find a funding source for this moving forward. And, that is going to be my focus, because without that, all of this is for naught. So thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Newsmith, followed by Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you to everybody who's worked on this project. Hold on, my screen just went blank here. So I'm going by memory here, but I had 3 questions. How long is it going to take us to accomplish these objectives?
The plan horizon is 10 years. There are some big goals, and I'll admit a lot of these things are going to require organizational coordination and some institutional and policy changes that it's hard to put a timeline on. But the plan horizon was 10 years, and I think the majority of implementation incremental steps were focused on about 5.
Okay.
So giddy up.
If you had to put a price tag on implementing the whole plan, how far does $3 million get us?
$3 million doesn't get you far. However, and I think this is a really important point, one of the things that Evanstonians need and these retail districts need is a vote of confidence and a little boost, you know, some real commitment by the city to be a partner, to commit to doing things differently, and a show of that commitment and confidence. And I think that $3 million will get you a show of commitment and will re-energize this group. You have a fabulous business community. They are very engaged, and right now they are the creative engine behind your placemaking efforts and your public space activation, and they're looking for partnership.
And if it costs us $3 million this year, and who knows how many more millions over the next decade, will there be a return on this investment, or what is the return? I know the answer. I love the plan. I'm feeding you some questions.
Did you want to say something to the? I think there's the potential for a huge return on investment. Evanston is already the natural fit to be the big city on the North Shore. We say this in the introduction of the plan, and a lot of what we're recommending to you is really just saying, own that, own this idea, step into this role of being the big city on the North Shore, go for some of the uniqueness, the risks, and the real entertainment and different types of, and building a destination in the downtown area in particular. And I think carving out that personality again for downtown Evanston as one destination, but also being able to better market the fact that you have this wealth and diversity of retail districts in Evanston. I mean, I think the typical person who doesn't know Evanston well, we know from survey responses and through this process, they don't see Evanston for the individual districts. It's just Evanston, and downtown looms large in mind. So being able to unlock that communication of the diversity and the wealth of different businesses and how to navigate around and really understand what's here and what's on offer is going to unlock so much potential, because you're going to get people exploring and seeing and patronizing businesses that they may have no awareness of now.
Thank you. You've done a great job with this report, and as evidence of that, just within the last few days, we turned around and changed to make sure that West Village was explicitly called out and included as a distinct destination. So I think this is great. It has my full support. It's going to cost way more than $3 million, so I will be voting in favor of that allocation. Looking forward to continuing to work on this over the next several years. Thanks.
Councilmember Kelly.
Thank you. Thank you for your great work on this. I'd really love to see us really prioritize our small businesses. I think that's really urgent, and there's a reason the feds really prioritized and put that front and central in ARPA with regard to ARPA expenditures, and I think it's time that our city invest. I did, at staff's request, I put together a proposal to allocate $2 million for our small businesses, and I just think we all need to understand that it's really these unique, independent, successful businesses that bring that attractiveness and marketability to our city and people to our city. So I'd like to request at our next, so I hope we can allocate more than the $3 million to really be able to ensure a significant allocation of funding for our small businesses. And I'd ask that maybe at our next Economic Development Committee meeting, if we could put that on the agenda to discuss the allocation for our small businesses. I think that's just so vitally important right now for our city to get that moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Council Member. And I want to add to that it is those small businesses that played such a critical role throughout this process. We had a task force with over 30 members representing each of the districts and really made sure that we reached out to a lot of the businesses, especially small businesses in our survey. And it was from their responses and their input that we crafted a lot of these strategies and recommendations that we feel like with placemaking, with the policy changes, that would really lift them up and further all of your work. So appreciate.
Great, thank you. And I just want to add one more comment. The qualified census tracts in Evanston have expanded to include a large chunk of our downtown now too. So, our small businesses are highly eligible for ARPA funds. And so I hope we can move forward. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I would also add that we asked a lot of short form answer questions in the survey, particularly to business owners. And part of our deliverable package will include all of those survey responses, which we will hand over to Paul and his team. A lot of small businesses in Evanston have made very clear requests, very specific requests. And I think one of the early action and early implementation steps is direct responses to the questions, the comments, all of these that already came in from the business environment. So we really want to get you guys off and rolling.
No one is asking to speak for the first time, so we go back to Councilmember Reed with 2 minutes and 15 seconds left.
Yes, I just want to, as Councilmember Kelly is advocating for the divvying up of the $3 million, I just want to also put on our minds, that this is a council in a city that is committed to equity, and representing a business district on the south end of town that shares a border with Chicago, and has certainly the largest largest population of African Americans in the city. That we, have a lot of African American and other minority business owners along Howard. I want us to focus in on that and make sure that we're using this $3 million to make substantial investments in those areas. And it's because we've made a lot of progress, particularly I'm thinking about in my ward on Howard Street. Yet I still have residents who, just at a ward meeting, a resident after the meeting said that, well, who would want to be on Howard Street? Howard Street is still dangerous and it's scary. And that is not my experience one bit. I invite all folks to come down to Howard Street, and we have some wonderful restaurants and businesses there. And other services available, and a theater, cabaret theater. So I encourage folks to come down, but we do have to change perception about Howard Street, and I think this is a great opportunity for us to do that. And just one last caveat here is, I did some analysis a few years ago about the the productivity of some of the small businesses in my ward, and I look at, for example, Good to Go, where they're paying $8,000 per square foot. I'm sorry, they have 8,000 square feet. They're paying about $8 per square foot in property taxes. This isn't layering in sales tax. And you look at some of the bigger box businesses, and they're paying as low as $2 or $3 per square foot. I think Target in my ward was paying as low as $1.75 per square foot for the land that they own. And so we're getting so much more bang for our buck as a city from our smaller local businesses. And so particularly I'll advocate for those on Howard. I'm sure my time is coming to an end. And so I also just want to highlight the fact that I trust the expertise. I think everyone up here trusts the expertise of this team. And we were told that we should embrace the fact that we are the little big city on the North Shore. And that means that we should take risk. And that means that we should do, things that maybe, Wilmette or Skokie would not do. And that means sometimes changing our zoning code and looking at, various things, and maybe even being as bold as looking at cannabis consumption lounges and other things like that. And I will wrap up my time here at a perfect time. But we really have to take that into consideration and really step into the fact that we are the big little city on the North Shore, and let's move in that direction. Let's take some risk. and let's not be afraid of doing things differently.
So speaking of not being afraid, with no further comment, will the clerk please take the roll?
And I just want to confirm Councilmember Burns is not on the Zoom, correct? Okay. Councilmember Sufferton?
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel? Aye. Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Hadagatis?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly? Aye. Councilmember Harris? Aye. Councilmember Nguyen? Aye. Councilmember Newsma?
Aye.
With 8 voting in favor and none voting against, the motion carries, and the report is accepted and placed on file. The $3 million are allocated, and the city manager is authorized to hire an additional employee in the Economic Development Division. Thanks for the great work. We are well aware that our work is just starting, and this is a down payment on our commitment to do that work. So thank you once again.
Thank you all.
Thank you for the opportunity. We're very proud of this work. Excited to see what's to come.
Thank you.
This brings us to SP3. Is there a motion relative to SP3? Council, first of all, is there a motion on this item?
I will move item SP3, which is ordinance 14-0-23, special use for a rooming house in the R6 district at 1566 Oak Avenue. This is the Margarita Inn.
I'll second.
Councilmember Newsma moves passage of ordinance 14-0-23. Councilmember Nguyen seconds. Just to be clear, since I know this item has a lot of interest, this is a motion to pass this ordinance for introduction. If this motion were to pass, the item would be on the agenda 2 weeks from now on May 22nd for action. This is separate. This is the special use, not the operating agreement. It's separate from the operating agreement, though that is also a document that you all should have access to. We begin with Councilmember Ravel, who will be followed by Newsma.
Well, before we embark on our discussion of this motion, I'd just like to ask our legal department to comment on the question of whether I have a conflict of interest that's been alleged before.
Thank you, Councilmember Ravel, Mayor Biss, members of the City Council, Clerk Mendoza. Councilmember Ravel, we've reviewed the allegations that you should recuse yourself or the requests, and based on your donations to Connections for the Homeless, and based on the financial disclosures requirements by the city and the county, at this time a donation is not part of that financial disclosure and does not create a conflict of interest.
Thank you.
Councilmember Newsma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I want to start by thanking everybody that has come out to speak on this item tonight, including the overwhelming number of supporters. But also thank you to those folks who aren't quite there yet for having the courage to speak up, and that's difficult to do when the overwhelming tide is against you numerically like that. So I appreciate that feedback. And my job throughout this process has been to try to find common ground with everybody on this issue, because we do have a problem here in Evanston. We have a problem nationwide. We have a problem here in Evanston with homelessness. This is due to nationwide factors well beyond our control. We can't fix income disparity. We can't fix affordable housing on our own here in Evanston. We can't fix our nationwide, our national health care system. What we can do is address the problem here in town, because this is where the problem exists. As we just talked about in the Evanston Thrives report, Evanston is the city on the North Shore. We are a city, and we have everything that comes with being a city on the North Shore, for better or for worse. We have fantastic diversity, racial and economic diversity. We have public transportation. We've got the Purple Line, the Metro. We've got multiple bus routes. All of these factors contribute to homelessness in our community, vagrancy, panhandling. We have a problem here, and we have to do something about it. That problem is here not because we invited it here, not because downtown Evanston said, hey, come and hang out. We have a problem here because of who we are and where we are. And we need to do more to address these problems, to address the unhoused homeless, to address panhandling, vagrancy, antisocial behavior. We need to do more to address those problems. Part of the solution is putting people in a building and giving people a roof to stay, a roof over their heads, and a bed to stay in, 3 meals a day. This is exactly what Connections for the Homeless is doing at Margarita Inn. If we don't do it here, where are we going to do it? If we don't do Margarita Inn, we're going to have more people on the street. We're going to have a tent city coming to a park near you. What this boils down to, or the objections, I think all boil down to 2 things: either not in this location, or Connections isn't doing it right. So I'd like to speak to both of those concerns. As far as the location, would it be right to put this in a different neighborhood, a more marginalized neighborhood? That wouldn't be right. And in fact, nobody's going to ask for this to be in their neighborhood. But we find ourselves in this situation, and I'd like to see Evanston step up and take advantage of this opportunity. A diligent search for alternative options and some wishful thinking haven't conjured up a different location. This is the location we're going to do it. They're doing it in Oak Park. We can do it here. And I'm comfortable doing it here as long as we do it right. And this is what I've said from the beginning. And I appreciate the support from folks who live in the neighborhood that are comfortable living with this facility right down the street. But it is incumbent upon the city to make sure that the operation is being held to the highest possible standards. Not only today, not only tomorrow, but we are doing this in perpetuity. And so we need to make sure we are constructing a regulatory oversight that holds the operators of the facility accountable for doing it right. And I think we are doing that. Connections is doing it right. Connections is the local experts in this. They've been dealing with the unhoused population for decades. They know what they're doing. Are they perfect? No. Nobody's perfect. They could work 18 hours a day instead of 17 hours a day. We can always ask them to do more. And I think they have demonstrated that over the last 3 years. They have learned and adapted to a situation that nobody, including Connections, expected to be in on March 18th of 2020. Notably, we've made some progress, significant progress, since the early days of this endeavor in developing a better, more collaborative working relationship between Connections and the police department. And I know that is my signal, but with the unanimous consent of council, I will go on for another minute or two. Thank you. But how can we ensure that that Connections continues to operate at this high level? We're putting the guardrails in guidelines in place. We've talked about a 3-legged stool with the conditions of special use, with the operating agreement, and with the good neighbor agreement. And I just will weigh in very briefly on the good neighbor agreement. The purpose of that document is to establish communications channels and kind of mutual expectations between the facility and the neighborhood. Everybody in the neighborhood was invited to participate in that process. Some people chose not to. Everybody was invited. At the end of the day, we have a document that accomplishes what we needed it to do. Mutual expectations are established, and connection and communications channels are established. The Good Neighbor Agreement is not where we are putting in the enforceable regulatory oversight. That comes through the conditions of special use, which are on the table tonight, as well as the operating agreement, which is on in our packet for consideration. I wanted to make sure that the council was making a wholly informed and fully informed and holistic decision on introducing special use. So having the draft operating agreement in front of us is important. We're going to be talking more about the operating agreement next meeting, but for now it's the conditions of special use. Because of the process that got us here tonight, the not 13, but it's actually 17 conditions of special use did not make it to the current draft. So I will make a motion to amend the ordinance 14-0-23 to include the conditions of special use that I just emailed to the city manager, city council, and the mayor a few minutes ago. These 17 conditions remain essentially unchanged from the list that was previously recommended by the Land Use Commission on November 30th of 2022, with one minor exception, that being to condition number 17, which specified the Good Neighbor Agreement, and I just wanted to add some text to make it clear that the Good Neighbor Agreement has already been accomplished, so we can cross that one off the list, but I still would like it to remain as one of the conditions. So that's all for now. Thank you.
Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Newsome moves to amend the ordinance as just described. Councilmember Wynn seconds. Seeing no discussion on the amendment, will the clerk please take the...
I have my light on.
On the amendment?
On something before we vote, so yes.
Before we vote on the amendment?
Yes.
Okay, so on the floor then is an amendment to this ordinance. Councilmember Reed.
Thank you. There have, similar to what Councilmember Ravel did to do a check as to the appearance of a conflict, I want to disclose that, one, I received rental assistance from Connections, and I do not see that rental assistance as a conflict of interest. I plan to vote on this item tonight. I do not intend for my participation or my vote to be a distraction from what is really important here, but I also intend for my vote to stand up for someone who, or for any future council member who may be low income or at a point in their term becomes low income and needs rental assistance. That should not disqualify a council member from participating in our system. If, for example, if I needed mental health services from Impact, which is in my ward, and they provided free mental health services to me, am I banned from voting on anything having to do with Impact? If I, God forbid, had to go, to the living room because there was a mental health crisis, or a future council member had to go, would they be, and they received services at no cost, would they be banned from voting on anything relating to Ascension or a future living room? When I was younger, I was homeless, and my family received assistance from Catholic Charities. Am I permanently banned from voting on anything relating to Catholic Charities? If there is a conflict that exists, which one does not, in my opinion, it would be the fact that I have seen the good work of Connections, the fact that I've had neighbors and their children who were housed because of Connections, the fact that I've been interacting with, the fact that I've interacted with homeless folks or people who are unhoused on the streets, and I've watched an outreach worker walk up and have a conversation with them and do solid work. If there was, it would be because when I was facing homelessness as a youth here in Evanston, there was not a shelter in the city that I could go to, that me and my grandmother could go to keep us here in Evanston, to keep me in our local schools, and to not be shipped off to the only shelter in the area for women and children, which was on the south side of Chicago in Roseland. So no, rental assistance that I received, that is open to the general public, that was not some special arrangement between myself and Connections, I do not believe disqualifies me from being able to vote here. And to move to the, I will support this motion, and then I do have a few questions once we get to the main item. But I am proud to vote for this for a whole host of reasons. And lastly, I will say I was very clear about my support for this project long before I received rental assistance, so much so, Councilmember Newsome earlier said that nobody would ask for this to be in the neighborhood. Well, maybe not nobody, because I specifically pushed well before that to potentially have this in the 8th Ward. And, I'm really glad that under Councilmember Newsome's leadership, we were able, or hopefully we'll be able to get this done in the fourth ward in an area that is really going to be beneficial to the folks who are living at Margarita Inn. So I'm really proud of this council for moving this forward. And I refuse to be someone who is bullied by folks who may have big money interest or may not want this in the neighborhood. And so I will be voting yes.
Councilmember Kelly, do you want to speak to the amendment or to the underlying issue? All right, Councilmember Kelly.
So, you know, I respect everything that you said, Councilmember Reed. I just want to mention ethics is about the appearance, and you want to protect against the appearance of conflict of interest. That what to any reasonable person might question it, that's the point of recusal. And I think, you know, it's about making it to the top of that list. When we hear that there's a long list of need for rental assistance, but that a council member makes it to the top, I mean, you just have to, that's what it's about. It's about understanding that, sure, I trust what you're saying, but we have, you know, tens of thousands of people. And so that's why one recuses themselves, just again, to protect against that appearance of possible conflict of interest. So, thank you.
Councilmember Reed's light is on. I just want to make the point that you have used up the great majority of your time and you spoke to having some substantive items to address. So okay. Would the clerk please take the roll on the amendment that has been made by Councilmember Nusma?
Councilmember Suffredin?
No.
Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Hadakaris?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly?
No.
Councilmember Harris?
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen?
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
With 6 voting in favor and 2 voting against, the motion carries and ordinance 14-0-23 is amended. Is there any further discussion on the now amended ordinance 14-0-23? Seeing no one who would like to speak for first time, we'll go back to Councilmember Reed with 55 seconds left.
Yes. One of my colleagues who is likely going to vote no, regardless of what happens here. And some public commenters have mentioned that the city contracted with Daniel Lober to look over the operating agreement. I know that's not exactly what we are voting on tonight, but I'm curious to know what, you know, if maybe Councilmember Kelly or someone else can illustrate exactly what, you know, just a few of the points, the key points that did not make it into this agreement. Councilmember Kelly?
Sure, I just don't want to use my time on, is this part of your time?
This is part of, this is like a magic trick where when a council member asks a question and then the question is being answered, the clock stops. And so when they ask another council member a question and that council member answers, it's a magic loophole where no time elapses at all. So you're welcome.
But I will reclaim my time at some point.
Certainly. There are many, many items. I would say about 90% of what Attorney Lober, who everyone should know, I was very proud of our city for hiring him because he is a, you know, longtime progressive.
If I may,
let me just
reclaim my time, just because I just want a specific answer to the question. Can you name some?
Sure,
of the,
I can go on and on. There are many items he's got from. They all involve safety measures for the tenants that are not included, and I'll begin
Can you name
with.
a couple?
Sure. There's one included. I'm just looking through here, like having a telephone in the lobby with a list of emergency numbers, a landline, so that tenants can easily grab the phone if they need to call somebody. There's a whole long list in here about the fire evacuation class, about posting the rules and the regulations, about training residents on the use of Narcan, not just the staff, about maintaining that staff who's there is awake, really detailed explanation about the staffing, much more detailed, about nuisances, not just adjacent, but 500 feet from the Margarita Inn.
All right. I appreciate.
I could go on. There's about 40 of these, and they're all very serious in terms of protections for the residents of, and I'm happy to go on and on.
No, I appreciate that. So if I may, at this point, reclaim my time, because I would presume that you put the important ones first there.
No, I didn't.
Is there, if someone from Connections can answer this, is there a telephone in the lobby that is available for residents? Is there an open telephone that folks can access? Or will there be?
Good evening, City Council members. I am Betty Bogg. I'm the CEO of Connections for the Homeless. There are telephones in all resident rooms.
Oh, so there's even better in their room. Your staff is trained on how to use Narcan?
Yes, and in fact, Narcan is now available over the counter and doesn't require specific training, although if someone wanted to be trained, we'd be happy to do that for them.
So it doesn't require, so folks, if they notice that someone is in a condition that requires Narcan, they have, and do you have Narcan available on site?
Narcan's available at all our sites, and it's a nasal spray administration now, no longer
than
the
shot.
injection.
Oh, great. I'm sure our fire department has looked at your fire safety code. So are you guys up to code when it comes to evacuation plans for fire?
We are, and to the best of our ability without yet owning the building, but there are evacuation
Sure.
plans posted in every room because it was formerly a hotel. We have not removed those.
Yes, and then your staff is awake while they're at work?
Yes. If they're working, they're required to be awake at all times.
Okay. I appreciate that list. I do think there were some items that were included. So, and we don't have to go over that now, and if somebody else wants to, but the point being, I think that those issues have been addressed. I have faith in Connections' ability to address those concerns. That list that I heard are all important things, but I didn't hear anything that really stuck out. And so I'll start to close with my time, and feel free to use anyone else's time how they wish. But with that in mind, what I'm really supportive of here is the housing first model, because we have to ensure, someone said during public comment that housing is a human right. It is a human right. You're not allowed to sleep out in a tent in the park. You'd be arrested for that. You're not allowed to sleep out in a tent anywhere in public or on someone else's private land unless they allowed you to. And so with that, we have to, as a municipality, as a federal government, as a state government, whatever, we have to prioritize creating housing opportunities for folks, even folks who are addicted, even folks who have mental illness, even folks who are least proximate to power. We have to ensure that they have the basic dignity of housing. And that is what this project does. And so I am more and more enthusiastic about supporting it. So thank you.
Councilmember Kelly with 4 minutes and 20 seconds left.
So, absolutely we need to find solutions to homelessness. But I think the operative word that I've heard from everybody is about finding, establishing safe housing. And it's not enough to just have faith, because an organization, and thank you everybody, the volunteers, for the great work you do, but it's not enough. We have to have the backs of those residents. We're not in the middle of a pandemic anymore. During that period, it was fine. Nobody knew what was going to happen in the world. We opened up hotels. We lowered the standards. We shouldn't be doing that now. These are vulnerable residents. Now is the time that we have to ensure that those safeguards are in place. And Attorney Lober wrote a wonderful proposal for an operating agreement with including emergency closure if we have to, and how that works step by step. Every single aspect, including training residents on Narcan. It's very lengthy. It's about 10 times longer than what we have here. And I don't see any reason. I don't think Connections would not want to follow this. So it's absolutely important that we as a council have the backs of these residents, that we ensure that we shouldn't just simply have faith in the operators. That's who I'm standing behind, are those residents. And I insist that we meet with Attorney Lober and we understand, because from my understanding with staff, he wrote this, turned it in, it was mostly gutted, staff negotiated with Connections, and this is what we got. That's not how this should be. As a council, we have an obligation. We should be absolutely looking this over together. We should be hearing from Attorney Lober, again, an expert in a national known expert in group housing and affordable housing and shared housing. We should hear from him about why these are important, and we should be making a decision together, not just seeing a draft that comes back to us that's been reduced, tremendously reduced, eliminating many except for maybe the insurance, about 2 clauses. Everything, all those really important safety measures are out. And yes, if they're willing to do it, why not have that in the operating agreement? And I also want to mention, I mean, this is a new licensing program that we have also, the only one in the nation. And I have deep concerns about this, and I do feel, as I think a couple of the members of the commission stated, that really we should have a finalized operating agreement that is integral to our special use permit. We don't know, we can't just say, oh, let's see what we get 3 months from now, we're going to work on this. This, what we have right here, to me, which is very inadequate in terms of safety for residents, this is all we're going to get. And for us to think, well, maybe we can get more, that's not how we should proceed with something like this. I mean, this is very serious. We're talking a very large number of homeless. We need to right now enact the best practices possible for those residents. These are not residents. These are residents who feel vulnerable. They aren't comfortable coming out and expressing concerns. He also has a whole section in here for residents about how they issue complaints and to whom, and about whistleblower and all of this. And there's some modified version, in what we see here, but he's really laid it out. This is what he does. Why would we reject this? So I really want to implore, I would like to see us hold this until we can meet with Daniel Ober and maybe Connections at the same time and go through this, because why this was so, so many of these items removed, they aren't in city code. Like all these little details, and no, I just read to you starting from page 1, and I did share this with council, I think last night, because I didn't get this until I'd been asking for over a week. I shared it with council last night. Everybody should read through the entire memo from Attorney Lober about why every single one of these items are of such utmost importance. He's looking out for the safety of these tenants. But he also makes mention about the neighborhood and about the way neighbors complain. He sets all that up too, the detailed way about how neighbors make their complaints, about how residents can file their complaints, not just they can file a complaint. It's very specific, and this all gives these residents protections. And I'm going to fight for these protections for these residents. And I don't want to see this an uphill battle. Let's do it right now. Let's hold this. Let's meet with Daniel Lober. Let's get it right as we go forward. And I'm sure I see no reason why Connections for the Homeless wouldn't agree to that. We all want safety for these residents. It's more important than any other establishment, this establishment, that we have these safety measures in place. Now is the time to do it. So I would ask that, I would like to ask that we hold this until we have that opportunity, because it's not, we weren't given it. I asked for it, so I got the documents from staff, but this wasn't, this isn't what everybody else saw. And, last night I shared it with staff, but it's not the same. And I think due diligence means that we meet with the attorney that we hired for this purpose.
Councilmember Kelly moves this item be held. The motion is out of order because this is a special order of business.
Oh.
The next speaker is Councilmember Nusma. Councilmember, as you can tell, with all the speakers so far, I'm being very lenient with time, and this is a super important issue. It's also in the fourth ward, so I'll be extra lenient with you, but I just do want to flag, you're already well over your 5 minutes, so I want you to be cognizant of that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not sure how Councilmember Kelly comes up with 90% of Mr. Lauber's content being rejected. I am going to very respectfully, but very firmly push back and say that is an incorrect statement. That is a false statement. That is not true. That is misleading. By my reckoning, we have a memo from our city attorney that kind of boils down Mr. Lauber's comments into 15 different bullet points. Of those 15, only one bullet point was not considered, was rejected out of hand. That one was Mr. Lauber's recommendation that the rules and regulations be posted in the building, as if it were simple as posting the 10 Commandments on the wall. What we do have is a participant's handbook, which is, 15, 20 pages. Every single resident has a copy of that handbook at their disposal. They receive a copy and sign off on that when they move in. So I think the spirit of that suggestion has been incorporated in the ordinance, in the operating agreement. A number of these other conditions or recommendations, if they weren't incorporated verbatim in the operating agreement, were at least incorporated in spirit by rewording, in some cases, moving to a different section where it better fit. And there are some other recommendations that do not appear in the operating agreement because they appear elsewhere in the city code. For example, the emergency preparation for emergencies and exit routes and stuff like that. It's elsewhere in the city code. It does not need to be written into the operating agreement. So I do think we are looking out for the residents in the building. We are doing right by the residents to require that they have the services that they need. And that's maybe the most important part of the operating agreement is, Section 8, the residents of Margarita Inn will receive housing case management. They will receive, if needed, behavioral, mental, and medical health care. They'll receive employment readiness services, financial literacy services, substance and alcohol use services, domestic violence counseling, transportation support, life skills counseling, and recreational activities, all part of the operating agreement, which we're not even voting on tonight. So we do have 2 more weeks to make this even better, but it's pretty darn good tonight.
Councilmember Revelle with 4 minutes and 45 seconds left.
Well, Councilmember Nusma responded in a lot more detail than I would have, but basically to agree that my understanding of Dan Lauber's recommendations are included in various other documents and city policy and city codes. So I think that's an important understanding to have. I guess the other thing I would say is I think it's important to acknowledge, and I think Connections themselves talk about the growing pains that they've experienced in the 3 years since they opened the Margarita Inn, but there's just been tremendous improvement. I'm really encouraged by the collaboration that's emerged between Connections and the police department, much better understanding on both sides, and I guess they're going to be creating a regular meeting schedule between Connections staff and EPD. So I think that bodes really well for us going forward. And I think there's been a lot more training of the staff at the Margarita Inn, in particular de-escalation and security training. So I think Connections has dealt with a huge challenge, suddenly having a really large group of homeless individuals who desperately needed someplace to go when the pandemic hit, and they've dealt with that emergency, and now they're moving into a general operating mode, and have really learned from the past 3 years. And I think with Councilmember Nusma's leadership, they're putting all kinds of operating agreements, the Good Neighbor Agreement as well. There's going to be a Margarita Inn Community Advisory Board. I mean, there are all kinds of structures being put in place to help the Margarita Inn have a better interaction with the community around it and with the police force and all of us. So I'm very supportive of this special use application.
Thank you. The only person still asking to speak is Councilmember Kelly. I'll just give you the same admonition I gave Councilmember Nusma. You're well over time, but I've let everyone else go over time, so I'll let you go over time too, but please be mindful of that.
Okay, quick question. So I can't hold it when it's a special order?
Correct. That's in the City Council rules.
Or neither table nor hold?
You could move to table. That would be in order.
That takes a 2/3 vote, right?
It takes a majority.
A majority. Okay. I disagree with Jonathan Nusma. There are many items in here. Again, it is about 90%, including detailed steps for closure, for emergency closure, and explaining. We have to have teeth in this. We have to hold a high standard. And, sadly, things happen, emergencies happen, and Daniel Lober walked through exactly how this happens, about how to relocate residents if necessary. All this has to be in place to make sure that we're holding that high bar. Emergency closings, the whistleblower, if a resident or a an employee wants to register a complaint of violation or mistreatment, so detailed about how to do that. And that's so important because residents fear retaliation. I know from dealing with residents at the HODC building. I meet with them now every other week in order to hear the complaints so I can advocate for them. It's just so important. We can't all do that, and it's costing me a lot of time and exhaustion, and it's very hard, and it's much easier if we get this right now. And again, data, the requirement for keeping records, that's in here in great detail. And let me just tell you, keeping records is so important so that we can measure the efficacy of this program, of this. No, not the way that, generally and vaguely, but he articulates in very explicit terms what kind of record keeping needs to be in there. That's not in here. That is not in here. It's in Daniel Lober's. That specificity is absolutely what's needed for the protection of these residents. So again, I think it's absolutely imperative that we meet with Daniel Lober, the person we hire to craft an operating agreement to provide the protections that these residents need. I think going forward shows a disregard for those very vulnerable residents that we all claim to care so much about. Thank you.
And Councilmember Reed, with a very, very brief.
30 seconds.
30 seconds.
Not even that. I appreciate Councilmember Kelly's plea there as someone who was in the shoes of the folks who are in Margarita Inn. I am sympathetic to those needs, and I'm really glad to see that it appears that most of those concerns were addressed in the operating agreement. We'll have time to look at that over the next 2 weeks when we actually vote on the operating agreement. But lastly, I hope that you remember, put a pin in this conversation when we talk about landlord licensing, because all of the concerns that you're saying now are very relevant. I have landlords in my ward, and we have them all over the city. We know of one, that in my ward where there's a lawsuit against the landlord for the housing conditions that they're providing. And so quite often it's not nonprofit organizations that are dedicated to, bettering the community that are taking advantage of people. It's folks who are using housing solely as a means of profit that are sometimes more likely to do that. And so when it comes time for landlord licensing, I hope that we keep this, and my 30 seconds has elapsed.
Would the clerk please take the roll on the motion to pass ordinance 14-0-23, which again has been amended as proposed by Councilmember Nusma? To introduce, yes.
Councilmember Sufferton?
No.
Councilmember Ravel? Aye. Councilmember Reed?
Yes.
Councilmember Hernacadis?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly?
No.
Councilmember Harris?
Yes.
Councilmember Nguyen?
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
With 6 voting in favor and 2 voting against, the motion carries, and ordinance 14-0-23 will be on the May 22nd agenda for action. This brings us to the consent agenda, and I've got a lot to say about the consent agenda. I've been asked to pull A2 off the consent agenda. I've been asked to pull ED2 off the consent agenda and to keep it off so it will not be considered. A bunch of items I've been asked to pull off for consideration for introduction and action. They are A16, P2, HS4, and HS5. And there are 2 items that will be pulled off because they were amended in committee. Those are P1 and P3. Councilmember Kelly?
HS3.
HS3 also. So I'll now read that list just in order so you all know what's been pulled off so far. A2, A16, P1, P2, P3, HS3, HS4, HS5, and ED2. Is there anything else folks want to see pulled from the consent agenda?
A7.
A7?
S2, please.
What did you say?
HS2.
HS2. Anything else? Seeing none, I would entertain a motion.
I move the consent agenda as amended.
Second.
Councilmember Reed moves the passage of the consent agenda except for A2, A7, A16, P1, P2, P3, HS2, HS3, HS4, HS5, and ED2. Councilmember Harris seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Suffredin?
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Hadakaris?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly? Councilmember Harris?
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen?
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
With 8 voting in favor and none voting against, the motion carries, and the consent agenda, except for all of the previously named items, is passed. Now we move to item A2. Councilmember Harris, would you care to make a motion on item A2?
I move for the approval of BMO Harris Amazon credit card activity.
Councilmember Harris moves approval of the BMO Harris Amazon credit card activity. Councilmember Nguyen seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Suffredin?
I abstain.
Councilmember Ravel? Aye. Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Hadakaris?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly? Councilmember Harris?
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen? Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
With 7 voting in favor, none voting against, and 1 abstention, the motion carries and the credit card activity is approved. This brings us to item A7. Councilmember Harris, would you care to make a motion here?
Yes. I move for the approval of contract award for C.H. Johnson Consulting for an independent Ryan Field rebuild economic impact study, bid number 2319.
Councilmember Harris moves approval of contract award to C.H. Johnson Consulting Incorporated. Councilmember Ravel seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Suffredin?
No.
Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Hadakaris?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly?
No.
Councilmember Harris?
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen? Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
With 6 voting in favor and 2 voting against, the motion carries and the contract is approved. This brings us now to item A16. Councilmember Harris, would you care to make a motion to suspend the rules so that we could hear, we could have a single vote for both introduction and action?
So moved.
Is there a second? Second. Councilmember Harris moves to suspend the rules to allow introduction and action to occur simultaneously on ordinance 44-0-23. Councilmember Nguyen seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Suffredin?
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Hadakaris?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Councilmember Harris?
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen? Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
With 8 voting in favor and none voting against, the motion carries and the rules are suspended. Now, Councilmember Harris, would you care to make a motion on the underlying ordinance?
I move for the ordinance 40-0-23.
Is there a second? Second. Councilmember Harris moves passage, which is to say both introduction and action of ordinance 44-0-23. Councilmember Nguyen seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Suffredin?
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Hadakaris?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Councilmember Harris?
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen? Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
With 8 voting in favor and none voting against, the motion carries and the ordinance is passed. This brings us now to item P1. Councilmember Kelly, would you care to make a motion and also perhaps explain the amendment that occurred in committee?
So I move item P1. Ordinance 33-0-23, special use for an apartment hotel in the R6 district at 1555 Oak Avenue, the museum residences on Oak, formerly King Home. And Councilmember Nusma amended this with stipulations that were provided this evening, correct?
Emailed to the council, the mayor, city manager at 7:03 this evening.
Thank you. Councilmember Kelly moves passage of ordinance 33-0-23 as amended in committee. Councilmember Nguyen seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Suffredin? Councilmember Ravel? Aye. Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Heracles?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly? Councilmember Harris? Councilmember Nguyen? Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
With 7 voting in favor and none voting against, the motion carries, and the ordinance 33-0-23 will be on the City Council agenda for action on May 22nd. This brings us to item P2. Councilmember Reed, would you care to
Yes.
make a motion?
I will move ordinance 46023, granting a special use.
Perhaps you want to suspend the rules first?
Sure. I will first move suspension of the rules for introduction and action on tonight. So I will move that.
Second.
Councilmember Reed moves suspension of the rules to allow ordinance 46-0-23 to have final passage in a single vote this evening. Councilmember Nusma seconds. Is there any discussion? You're speaking to the...
Yeah, I just want to make sure
Councilmember Reed.
it's clear for all of my colleagues, this does require a unanimous vote, that this is the reason we're asking for suspension of the rules is because of the timing of the license and to make sure that they meet state guidelines. So, thank you.
The clerk please take the roll on the motion to suspend the rules.
Councilmember Sufferton?
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel? Aye. Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
Councilmember Heracles?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly? Councilmember Harris?
Aye.
Councilmember Nguyen?
With 8 voting in favor and none voting against, the motion carries and the rules are suspended. Now, Councilmember, do you want to?
Sure. I will move ordinance 46023, granting a special use for a cannabis dispensary and a special use for a type 2 restaurant in the B3 Business District at 100 Chicago Avenue.
Second.
Councilmember Reed moves final passage, which is to say both introduction and action of ordinance 46-0-23. Councilmember Harris seconds. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Reed.
Quick question. I'm sorry to put the Amaya and the team. Really quick question for you. And I ask you this because confident you got the votes tonight. But I'm just curious about your model. And I know at your Wheeling location, for example, you are seeking to have a consumption lounge. Is that correct? Yeah. And is that and you're not asking for a consumption lounge here at this location, but do you think that the ability to have, if the city code reflected an ability for you to have a consumption lounge, do you think that'd be a net benefit for your business or for your model?
Thank you for the question, Councilman. Amaya Pawar from OK Cannabis. The challenge with the space here in Evanston is, yes, I think it could be. The challenge with our space in Evanston is just not quite as big as
Sure.
Wheeling, and so I think that's where we're limited.
But generally, your model shows that particularly in Wheeling, having the ability to have a consumption lounge. I understand that this space may not grant you, in its current configuration, the ability to do that, but it is a net positive to your business. It increases sales, increases our sales tax revenue as a result.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, will the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Sufferton? Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Heracles?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly? Councilmember Harris? Councilmember Nguyen? And Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
With 6 voting in favor and none voting against, the motion carries and the ordinance is passed. This brings us now to item P3, which, if I understand it correctly, was amended in committee and also is perhaps going to be amended again. Councilmember Kelly, would you care to make a motion and perhaps describe what's happened so far?
Sure. So I'd like to move item P3, ordinance 48-0-23, granting major variations for a K-8 education institution public on property located at 2000 Simpson in the OS Open Space District. So this was amended to remove one of the drop-offs in order to save the trees, and I think that's basically it. So we removed one of the curb cut drop-offs, I believe.
Second.
Councilmember Kelly moves passage of ordinance 48-0-23 as was just described. It was amended to require one less curb cut and car drop-off location. Councilmember Wynn seconds. We'll begin with Councilmember Reed, followed by Nusma.
Yes, very quickly, I just sent the council a correct amendment. I made a mistaken and incorrect amendment earlier. The correction is in the email. There's just a confusion about whether it was note 13 or the Land Use Commission's recommendations, and so the updated correct amendment is before, so I will move that.
Just to make sure I understand, so you're moving to essentially fix the amendment that was made in P&D. Got it. Is there a second?
Second.
So Councilmember Reed moves to amend ordinance 46-0-23 regarding, it's essentially to clean up the amendment regarding the second lay-by lane. Councilmember Nusma seconds. Is there any discussion on that amendment? Seeing none, will the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Suffredin. Councilmember Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Hadakaris.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly. Councilmember Harris. Aye. Councilmember Wynn. Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
With 7 voting in favor and none voting against, the motion carries, and ordinance 48-0-23 is amended as previously described. Councilmember Nusma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to offer another amendment, which we discussed at P&D, but I will make that motion here tonight to add language, which I emailed just a minute ago. That language reads, the school district shall explore LEED Gold certification or equivalent and integrate measures that meet or exceed the City of Evanston's bird-friendly requirements as feasible.
Second.
Councilmember Nusma moves to amend the ordinance 48-0-23 in the manner just described regarding LEED and bird-friendly requirements. Councilmember Wynn seconds. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Hadakaris.
Just a clarification for folks that weren't at P&D. The building permit is issued by the state. Can't remember the acronym for the organization, but they do not have to meet any of our CARP requirements. But as discussed in P&D, this would just say that they were making the best effort to get to it as good as they can in the LEED certification, and then also meet those other goals. So just so everyone knows.
Thank you. Would the clerk please take the roll on this amendment?
I just emailed it, Councilmember.
Yeah, so this is, it's essentially to deal with the fact that the school district doesn't have to comply with our rules. I think it's the Regional Office of Education probably that, and so this is sort of, essentially it's an effort to work with them on our LEED certification as well as our bird-friendly ordinances, even though we're not really the regulatory body.
Yep, thank you.
Would the clerk please then take the roll on the amendment?
Okay. Just for Councilmember Suffredin had to drop off. So Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Hadakaris.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly. Councilmember Harris. Aye. Councilmember Wynn. Aye. Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
With 7 voting in favor and none voting against, the motion carries, and ordinance 48-0-23 is amended as just discussed. Is there any further discussion on this item? Seeing none, would the clerk please take the roll on ordinance 48-0-23 as now, I guess, thrice amended?
Councilmember Ravel. Aye. Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Hadakaris.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly. Aye. Councilmember Harris. Aye. Councilmember Wynn. Aye. Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
With 7 voting in favor and none voting against, the motion carries. So ordinance 48-0-23 as amended will be on our agenda for action on the evening of May 22nd. This brings us now to item HS2. Councilmember Hadakaris, would you care to make a motion on item HS2?
Sure. I move approval of HS2 1-023, amending the city code and creating a section 3-2-22, retail single-use bag tax and plastic bag ban.
Second.
Councilmember Hadakatis moves passage of ordinance 1-0-23. Councilmember Reed, was it?
Yes.
Seconds. Will the clerk please add Councilmember Burns to the roll? Councilmember Reed.
Yes, I am really excited about this. I had the great opportunity to work with Cara and the team for what feels like almost a year, but maybe 8 months or so, I don't know, on this. And so really excited about the thoughtfulness that was put into this. This has been bounced around for some time. Evanston years ago was a leader on banning single-use plastic bags, and so I thank our self-proclaimed graybeards for being on the council then and taking leadership then. But what we have found since is that those kind of the particular kind of single-use ban that we had, well-intentioned, didn't work, and businesses just switched to much thicker plastic bags. They found the loophole and they exploited it, and they went all the way, and so then we ended up with these really thick plastic bags that did the exact opposite of what we intended. And so what we found is that by implementing both a ban and a tax, a very clear ban, and again I appreciate staff for the extremely thoughtful language here in the ban and what we are banning and what we're not. A very clear ban works when combined, especially with a tax, because we still don't want folks using the paper bags or the 40% post-recycled material bags. We still don't want folks using those. We want them using reusable bags. We want them to make sure that they have the knowledge they need to safely use those reusable bags. And so the ordinance that is before us made a lot of compromise for a lot of our smaller businesses. It really took in the feedback that we heard from our smaller businesses. While I am not enthusiastic about it, I appreciate Councilmember, particularly Ravel and Nusma, for leading on making some amendments to protect our small businesses, but I also appreciate that we made sure that we were really listening to our small businesses, and Councilmember Burns made sure that we did this, and we didn't go too far, and we didn't remove the ban for small businesses as well. And so I'm happy that we're here, and this will help us, continue to inch toward meeting all of our CARP goals in a timely manner. There's a trailer bill that is coming for other single-use plastics and styrofoam and clamshells and all that stuff. But this is a wonderful first step, and I'm looking forward to us passing this.
Councilmember Nusma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I am looking forward to voting yes on this one. Appreciate all the work that has gone into this from staff and council members. I just want to point out that restaurants are excluded from the bag fee. Non-chain store organizations are included, and any retailers under 10,000 square feet. At some point in the future, I'm not opposed to reducing that 10,000 square feet number. Just as a point of reference, the CVS on Sherman Avenue downtown is probably just under 10,000 square feet, just to give everybody a visual. So room for potential improvement in the future, as with anything, but this one is good to go right now.
Councilmember Kelly.
Thank you. So going forward, I would like to have seen this now too. I was recently made aware by a resident, and I'm very grateful to her for bringing to my attention a program in Tucson that was a pilot program that scaffolded the program through a consortium of businesses that joined together to pilot a program, so that you brought it in not just suddenly, but they were able to test the waters, put signs out, start encouraging people, so it didn't just hit suddenly, but people slowly became informed and aware. And this is something I've also seen when traveling, when there's signs out, bring your bag. We don't have much of that going on. So if we are, Councilmember Newsman, to your point, going to move, I would ask that as we move forward, even now, I would like to have seen this because I do think, and I'll share it with all of, I just recently received this from a resident, but I think it's great, this consortium to reinvent the retail bag about bag reduction strategies, a way to scaffold that in, again, by encouraging with signage and other measures. I think that makes more sense to do it that way. So I would just ask if we do move to smaller, that we or maybe we consider doing this now for smaller venues. So I'll share that with the whole council.
Do you want to ask me a question about that?
Do I want to ask you a question? No, I just want to say I'm going to share this consortium out of Tucson, the bag reduction pilot program, to say that I think we should go ahead and do that encourage this among smaller businesses now as opposed to just, okay.
Since no one is asking to speak for the first time, we'll go to Councilmember Reed, whose gambit did not succeed, and will have to have his speaking count against his time, of which he has 2.25 minutes left.
Yes, I tried to use the loophole there. You didn't play into it, Councilmember Kelly. All right, I agree with you, Councilmember Kelly. I think that education and making sure that residents are aware of this is key. And in fact, that's why my original version of this had a 15-cent bag tax, and that 5 cent would be dedicated toward making sure that we provided the proper education for residents and provided the resources for our low-income residents to have access to these reusable bags. The Human Services Committee decided to take that 5 cent out and move the bag tax down to 10 cent, which is still fine. Again, I'll note, I don't think the whole council is there, so I was in Mexico, and the bag fee there was $1.50 for a single reusable bag. And so, 10 cents, 15 cents, we can have that debate. But what is important is making sure that we have the funding. And so I would like to see us, right, you're exactly right. And I think many of us up here would agree with you that you're right. We need to educate residents on this.
Before we impose a tax.
And with the tax, I believe. But what's key is by us saying that we are taking out that 5 cent that would go toward education and go toward exactly what you're asking for, we are, in essence, because I believe everyone up here agrees, our health director told us that it makes sense for us to educate folks. I think our environment team would say that it makes sense for us to educate folks. Common sense would tell us that it makes sense for us to educate folks. If we're not going to recoup that revenue through the tax, then we have to be committed as a council to making that investment, whether it comes from our CARP funds or from somewhere else, to make sure residents know what is happening. And if we aren't going to make that investment, we are going to leave some folks behind. So, I would like to see us very soon, and our CARP team come up with a way for us to make an investment, separate of the 5 cent tax in this. And if we can't, so we need to do that. And so that's in response to you, Councilmember Kelly. So hopefully you'll be supportive of moving money from somewhere in the city coffers to doing exactly what you just proposed.
Councilmember Newsma with 4 minutes and 20 seconds left.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to relay a request from Maine Dempster Mile and Catherine Gotzik that when we are doing the outreach and education, that we print out material in multiple languages, not only Spanish, but the Asian languages as well. And we do some posters, graphics, to really help get the message out to small businesses.
Seeing no further comments, would the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel? Aye. Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Hadakaris?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly? Aye. Councilmember Harris? Aye. Councilmember Nguyen? Aye. Councilmember Newsma?
With 8 voting in favor and none voting against, the motion carries. Ordinance 1-0-23 will be on the May 22nd agenda for action. This brings us to item HS3. Councilmember Hadakaris, would you care to make a motion?
I make a motion to move HS3 Ordinance 24-0-23 establishing Evanston's Fair Workweek Ordinance.
Second.
Councilmember Hadakaris moves passage of Ordinance 24-0-23. Councilmember Reed seconds. Councilmember Reed.
Yes. This is again, this is another ordinance that we've spent. Mayor Biss joined me on this journey, as well as Allison Lepsinger, our new policy coordinator, and this was a tough one. This was a huge undertaking that required a lot of research, required a lot of negotiating and hearing out the concerns of specific industries. And this is an ordinance that reflects those changes. We heard concerns from the healthcare industry. We heard concerns from nursing homes. We heard concerns from childcare. And we made adjustments to this ordinance. And I want to note that we're hearing one more concern tonight. And I want to make sure that we're addressing as many concerns with this as possible. And so I had an opportunity to step outside and speak to the Klitskys. Am I pronouncing the last name correctly? Yes. Wonderful. And I explained to them, I said to them, I believe this ordinance addresses your concern. If there is a weather event that would cause cause you to not be able to landscape for that day, I think this ordinance would allow you to be exempt from its provisions. I spoke with Allison. We went back and we double checked. And when I said that to them, they said, oh, well, if that's the case, if we can, make adjustments for when it rains or for when, I think we're okay with this, is what was shared. And so what I just sent to the mayor and the council is an amendment that, makes it very clear for the landscaping industry and for others like them that if, there's a weather event that causes you to not be able to operate, right? If it's raining and you can't go out and you can't mow lawns or whatever you're doing, then, you're exempt from this. If it snows and during the winter and, they're plowing, of course, they still have to follow this. But if for some reason you can't operate, it just makes very clear that exemption for them. And I think that addresses the major concern of the landscaping industry. And so I move that amendment to this ordinance.
So Councilmember Reed moves to amend Ordinance 24-0-23 to, I would say, further clarify that weather that would prohibit business operations is an exemption. Councilmember Nguyen seconds. Just in the interest of really obnoxious pedantry, there's a little typo. I think the parenthesis needs to be closed and the word including needs to be decapitalized, but we'll just let that go. Is there any discussion on the amendment? Are you ready to cede the floor, Councilmember?
Yes.
Okay, Councilmember Nguyen, followed by Ravel.
With this amendment, my concern is addressed. Thank you.
Councilmember Ravel, followed by Nusma.
And I guess, since this is just for introduction this evening, and we have time to hear from our landscaping folks about whether this amendment addresses their concerns, then I'm comfortable with that as well.
Councilmember Nusma.
I'm comfortable with that amendment as well. I would also like to point out that the draft of this ordinance was not in our original packet, so I haven't had a chance. I know it was posted late in the day. I haven't had a chance to review it. Since it's just for introduction, I'm comfortable voting for it at this point, and I'll have a chance to review the language in greater detail before it comes back to us for action. Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, would the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Hadakaris?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Councilmember Harris?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed? Councilmember Nguyen, sorry.
Aye.
Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
With 8 voting in favor and none voting against, the motion carries, and Ordinance 24-0-23 as just amended will appear on the May 22nd agenda for action. This brings us now to item HS4.
I'm sorry, I thought we just voted on the amendment only.
Oh, I'm in a hurry up here. We absolutely voted on, you all absolutely voted only on the amendment. That was completely my fault. I apologize. Is there any discussion on the underlying ordinance? Councilmember Kelly.
Yes. I think, as it was evidenced at the Human Services meeting, the landscape and, community found out about this. There are many other businesses that are discovering this. I've met with, folks at the Mather and others, and obviously small businesses are very concerned about this 15 person employee limit, whereas Chicago, I think it's 100, if I'm not mistaken, right? It's at 100. So this feels very draconian to a lot of small businesses. As a longtime union representative, and I absolutely care about working conditions, but I also absolutely care about our businesses. And I just think that what's happening, like I say, as was witnessed when the lawn care folks heard about this, they weren't there for that, but they heard about it. This is going on throughout our community. And I think what really needs to happen to move forward with this is for the sponsors of this to hold a couple of community meetings for all of the, not just, going around individually and maybe catching one business or another, to schedule a couple of community meetings and put out the word so people can come forward and you can really get community input to really understand any potential unintended impacts that might be there before we proceed. So I would like to see this held over so that you schedule two, I would say, on different days, different times, to be able to and put out the word that you're holding community meetings regarding the Fair Work Week proposal. I think that's just so important because it shouldn't just be catch as catch can. Somebody heard about it because they happened to be at Human Services. So I don't know if I'll get a second on that. I didn't have a chance to talk to people beforehand, but I would like to hold this and just request that you please schedule the sponsors, I guess, Mayor Biss and Councilmember Reed, that you schedule, 2 meetings for the community, for small businesses, for everybody impacted, so that they can come and you can hear from them and get sufficient input.
Councilmember Kelly moves to hold ordinance 24-0-23. Is there a second? The motion fails for lack of a second. No one is seeking to speak for the first time. Councilmember Reed with 2.5 minutes left.
Yeah, I just want to say I appreciate your concerns there, Councilmember Kelly. This ordinance has been written about like crazy in the news. We've had this ordinance at least 3 or 4 Human Services Committee, if not more, actually, I think, because we've held it a number of times at Human Services. I wish our democratic processes overall were better, but this is the process. Those were the community meetings that we had council members, more than just myself or Mayor Biss. We had multiple council members from multiple perspectives being able to hear the feedback from multiple industries. And we heard that feedback from the industries that felt they would be most impacted. Nobody's happy about this, except for maybe the employees. No business owner is necessarily, yippee hurrah about this, except for maybe folks that are already implementing these policies and would like to see a level playing field. But, we've had many community conversations. In a few minutes, we're going to vote on amendment to the leaf blower ordinance. We also decided as the Human Services Committee that we would like to review this ordinance in a few months. And in fact, we made a motion that in 8 months, we were going to come back and look at this specifically for childcare and for nursing homes and, other industries. And so we will have the opportunity to make tweaks to this. So I'm looking forward to this is just for introduction. We will still have another meeting. In fact, reach out to folks. There's another meeting while this is coming. And the whole council will be here to hear from folks. And they'll have maybe 2 or 3 minutes to speak, and we'll make sure that we bring folks up as needed. And so, really looking forward to moving forward on this. I appreciate your concern and guidance there.
Councilmember Kelly with 3 minutes left.
So it's not the same to expect people to pour out because it happens to be buried in some agenda. I think when something is having this kind of impact, I've heard from so many people, this wasn't mine. I've been, meeting with lots of businesses. I met at the Mather, and the impact on this, when I hear about it, I never would have realized the tremendous impact, say, for example, on the nursing floor at the Mather, or for some of these smaller businesses that during seasonal months, sometimes they exceed 15. It feels very draconian. When Chicago's is 100, but we're setting our limit at 15 employees, I think it's incumbent when you put this out. I think it's great that you want to look into this and possibly pass it, but I think now you need that input. It's caused a stir. You shouldn't say, oh, you're tough luck if you didn't read through the schedule and see that we were talking about this at Human Services. I think now we have the input. For example, I think the landscape community, they happen to hear about it and they're like, whoa, no, and now we're giving them the courtesy because they caught it, because they happened to be at the Human Services meeting. Now we're amending it to accommodate them. We need to hold community meetings where we put it out about the Fair Work Week ordinance so that the business community can come forward, so that you can hear everything that I've been hearing too. And I think it's just really important. There's plenty of other businesses that we haven't heard from to see if it needs to be modified to be more appropriate for our city. And that's what I'm asking. Thank you. Council member, when I moved to hold it, I think you were out when I moved to hold it in case you wanted a second, I'll hold on it.
Seeing no further discussion, would the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel. Aye. Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Hadakaris.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly. Councilmember Harris. No. Councilmember Nguyen. Aye. Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
With 6 voting in favor and 2 voting against, the motion carries, and ordinance 24-0-23 will be on the May 22nd agenda for action. I just want to quickly say I have had a ton of meetings about this issue. I think none of those meetings were because someone was scouring committee agendas. I think all of those were because of outreach that I initiated to, for example, all the SSAs, to, for example, the Chamber of Commerce. We've made very significant changes in response to that. We've got 2 more weeks to make more changes if need be, and I will continue to take every meeting from anybody who wants to discuss it. I simply disagree. I'll call on you, but I don't agree. I don't think that holding a town hall meeting or a community meeting is the right way to get input, and other ways are wrong ways to get input. I think there's a lot of different options, and I just feel really good about the proactive outreach we've done on this issue, and will continue to do. Councilmember Kelly?
So I would just ask that you consider that, because there are a lot of businesses that haven't been informed, that are catching wind of it now, and I just think if you put out, you have a couple of meetings, not town halls, but for it to just to collect input, I think that can only help to inform you of the needs and interests, and to make sure that there isn't any other additional modification. We just made a modification tonight, again, based on just catching it by chance. So I would just ask that you would consider maybe between now, maybe next week, just scheduling a meeting just to collect input.
Thank you. This brings us to item HS4. Yes.
So I move to suspend the rules for introduction and action for HS4 Ordinance 27-023, amending portions of Title 7, Chapter 11, City Beaches and Boat Ramps of the City Code.
Is there a second?
Second.
Councilmember Hadakaris moves suspension of the rules to allow it for introduction and action this evening on Ordinance 27-0-23. Councilmember Reed seconds. Councilmember Reed, are you seeking to weigh in on the motion to suspend the rules?
Oh, yeah, actually I am.
Councilmember Reed.
I'm just curious why. I mean, I perfectly agree with the policy. It makes sense. I just think that suspending the rules should be used sparingly. So just an explanation for the suspension.
I believe the answer is very simply because of how soon the summer is, but I'll let the city manager weigh in.
Yeah, that's exactly correct, Councilmember. Just due to the fact of where we're at in the season, just trying to move along as quickly as possible.
Okay, that's suffice.
Will the clerk please take the roll on the motion to suspend the rules?
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Hadakaris.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly. Councilmember Harris. Councilmember Nguyen. Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
With 8 voting in favor and none voting against, the motion carries and the rules are suspended. Councilmember Hadakaris, would you care to make a motion on the ordinance now?
I move to approve HS4, Ordinance 27023, amending portions of Title 7, Chapter 11, City Beaches and Boat Ramps of the City Code.
Councilmember Hadakaris moves final passage of Ordinance 27-0-23. Councilmember Harris seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Hadakaris.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly. Councilmember Harris. Councilmember Nguyen. Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
With 8 voting in favor and none voting against, the motion carries, and Ordinance 27-0-23 is passed. Councilmember Reed? Councilmember Hadakaris, would you care to make a similarly seasonal motion?
I move suspension of the rules to allow for introduction and action of HS5, Ordinance 47023, amending Title 8, Chapter 26, leaf blowers.
Councilmember Hadakaris moves suspension of the rules to allow for final action on Ordinance 47-0-23 this evening. Councilmember Harris seconds. Councilmember Reed.
Yes, I suppose this is the request for this, the recommendation for suspending the rules is similarly, I suppose the leaf blower season must start, although I've not seen a ton of leaves on the ground, but I guess, so I will take that at face value, but my concern here about this is, and it is related to my desire to support the suspending of the rules. And I even spoke to the Klitskys about this. We have, I recall, this new requirement puts a burden on businesses, right? That's obvious. It's something everybody up here has been concerned about. They have to buy new equipment, potentially electric leaf blowers. And this disproportionately impacts our, at least the ability to upgrade their equipment disproportionately impacts smaller businesses, particularly black and brown, and maybe in this, particularly black and brown businesses. I'm curious where we left off with the discussion of providing funding to support those small businesses in upgrading their equipment to electric leaf blowers.
Good day, members of the City Council. Ike Obo, Director, Health and Human Services Director. To your question, we have provided funding for landscaping companies to utilize this funding to upgrade their equipment in the tune of $3,000. So far, we've had 4 landscaping companies take advantage of the grant, whereas we have 3 other landscaping companies that are pending review just based on information and documentation that is needed in order to approve them.
Mm-hmm. And $3,000, that's the cap for any single business? And how many machines does that get someone?
I'm not exactly sure how much that will get a landscaping company, but that's the cap, $3,000 per business.
I think my recollection was not very many. It was 1 or 2, if I'm not mistaken. It was certainly a number around there, and I don't know how sustainable that is for those small businesses. I support this. I think it makes sense. But as we're moving forward with this, and we often, some of us up here talk a lot about, the small business community. Sometimes it seems to focus on a section of the small business community, and I just don't want this particular section of the small business community to be left out as we implemented policies that made it harder for them to operate their business, and potentially could have put some of those businesses out of operation, at least within our city limits. And it makes sense because there are health concerns, there are noise concerns, which also are tied to health concerns. There are real legitimate concerns, but I just want to make sure that we're not picking and choosing when we listen to the science and when we care about small businesses, and that we're consistent with that across the board. And so I will support the suspension of the rules and ultimately support this amendment.
So just as a reminder, we're officially debating the suspension of the rules. Next is Councilmember Hadakatis, followed by Ravel.
Just one question for Director Ogbo. What are the requirements for the grant? Is there a cap on the size of the business, or is it any landscaping company?
It's just any landscaping business that is based in Evanston. It is $3,000, irrespective of how small or big your business is.
Thank you.
Councilmember Ravel, followed by Kelly.
Well, I just want to clarify that we've already passed the ordinance that, implements the ban on gas-powered leaf blowers. This merely adjusts the hours. Basically, it goes back to the hours that were in existence before we approved the ban. So we kind of, on the spur of the moment, changed the hours, but so this is getting back to a more realistic time for our landscaping companies to be able to do the work they're needing to do.
Councilmember Kelly.
Are these hours, I mean, it's really nice not to have the noise, and I don't know, Councilmember Ravel, if you can speak to the difference in noise levels between the electric. I know it's quieter, right, overall?
Just
much
point
better.
point of order.
Way quieter.
Just point of order. We're discussing the.
I know the hours.
Suspension. No, the suspension of the rules.
Okay. Well,
Hey, nobody.
I mean,
called
not
me on it.
everybody's discussing the suspension of the rules. Okay. So I guess my question is are these expanded hours, is this comparable to what other cities that have adopted, ban on gas blowers? Are these?
Well, we are the only municipality in the area who've adopted the ban on gas-powered leaf blowers. So, I mean, we're way ahead of that. And they are, if you walk down the street and you notice somebody, raking leaves, and then you hear a little whisper, that's their electric leaf blowers. I mean, it's very quiet.
Terrific. And then my other comment is just to dovetail a bit on Councilmember Reed. Are we issuing citations to the homeowners or to the businesses?
We're issuing citations to both. Keep in mind the way that the ordinance is designed is if there is a first offense, we do not issue a citation right away. We issue a warning. And if there are subsequent violations for that property owner or the landscaping company, at that point we start to cite up to even 5 times. So it goes from $100 up to $250, depending on how many times they violate the ordinance.
Thank you. So, and that goes, the warnings, all of them are equally to the homeowner as to the firm, to the landscape firm?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. I just wonder if we've considered just, issuing citations to the homeowners or to the property owners.
Yeah, so that's the way that we have designed it. It will go to both the landscaping company and the property owner.
Okay. Have we considered only the property owners?
Well, if it's the property owner who is in violation at the time in which we...
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I mean who employ the firm,
Yes.
the landscape firm. So the landscape firm would not receive the citation, like say I employ somebody who, they don't get the citation, I would get it for.
Yes, so if the property owner, of course, hires a landscaping company, what we do initially, as I said, is we send a warning letter to them, and if it continues, the citation goes to both the property owner and the landscaping company for the violation of the ordinance.
Okay, thank you. And have we done anything to educate property owners and homeowners regarding what would be maybe an appropriate increase? I just think for our smaller landscape firms, we don't want to drive them out of business. I'm glad we have the grants. I don't know, it sounds like maybe we're not getting a lot of applications for those, but it seems to me it would be great if we did some sort of an awareness for property owners that, on average, we recommend that you consider increasing your payments to this amount or something along those lines.
Yeah, absolutely. Prior to the ban, we sent out a number of communications and publications about the ban, and what should be expected from our property owners and the landscaping companies. We also had a public service announcement. We revamped our website. We provided pamphlets, both in Spanish and in English, about the ban and the allowable hours. So I think we have done well in the way in which we have educated our residents, but I think more can also be done. And we also took a look at the improvements that have been made since the ban, and I wouldn't say that we have received a significant number of complaints. As a matter of fact, we have received a number of correspondences on how quieter it has been in Evanston.
I guess I just want to make sure that we have some measures in place, that we aren't driving out, because I have heard complaints that, you know, folks are feeling pushed out, that we're favoring the large landscape businesses, that we really aren't making accommodations or even educating property owners on how to increase their pay so they don't, or on maybe passing out information to their smaller landscape companies about the grants that are available. I think we might need to do a little outreach more on that front.
Yeah, absolutely. We can increase our outreach. Prior to the ban, we sent communications and educational materials to our landscaping companies. We do have a list of our landscaping companies that we can continue to educate and provide information to regarding this process.
I believe no one else is seeking to speak, so would the clerk please take the roll? This is still on the motion to suspend the rules.
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Hadakaris?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Councilmember Harris? Aye. Councilmember Nguyen? Aye. Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
With 8 voting in favor and none voting against, the motion carries and the rules are suspended. Now, Councilmember Hadakaris, would you like to make the motion on the underlying ordinance?
I will make a motion for final action on HS5, ordinance 47023, amending Title 8, Chapter 26, leaf blowers.
Is there a second? Councilmember Reed moves passage of ordinance 47-0-23. Councilmember moves final passage for introduction and action of ordinance 47-0-23. Councilmember Harris seconds.
Hadakaris.
Councilmember Hadakaris. I'm sorry. It's just you guys are both so far over there. It's hard to even know. I apologize. Let me try that again. And try not to speak with 10:46 p.m. brain. Councilmember Hadakaris moves final passage of ordinance 47-0-23. Councilmember Harris seconds. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, would the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Hadakaris?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Councilmember Harris? Aye. Councilmember Nguyen? Councilmember Nusma?
Aye.
With 8 voting in favor and none voting against, the motion carries, and ordinance 47-0-23 is passed.
Where's Ike? Ike has his power supply. Sorry.
This concludes our agenda. So now we have call of the wards. Councilmember Burns.
No report.
Councilmember Ravel.
I would just like to take this moment to acknowledge the recent passing of former 7th Ward Alderman Steve Engelman. I think he served like maybe 3 or 4 terms. He was a long time council member, very thoughtful, good-humored, even-keeled, problem solver, really set a fine example for what a alderman should be, and he will be greatly missed.
Councilmember Reed.
Yeah, 8th Ward meeting will be the last Thursday of the month. We had our first ward meeting out in the community and not at a city center. We had it at Peckish Pig, and I actually encourage my colleagues to try that from time to time, to have a ward meeting outside of a city facility at a local restaurant. What I noticed was, and why I think I'm going to continue this pattern, is I noticed that folks, without being prompted, bought food and drinks and actually supported the local restaurant on what would have been a pretty quiet Thursday. And so I think doing this again and actually asking folks, hey, support our local businesses while you're at the ward meeting, make this a thing, may, in a small way, in a pretty small way, be beneficial for our local businesses, introduce people to new places. And so I'm going to try it out, and I'll share that with you all. So looking forward to our next ward meeting, and next week I'll announce who's going to be there.
Councilmember Hadakaris.
Nothing to report.
Councilmember Kelly.
Did we pull ED2?
We pulled ED2, but I didn't even entertain a motion on it. The person seeking support asked for some time.
Okay, got it. I'm sorry. Thank you. Let's see. So I would just, again, I'm going to be advocating for the highest standards of safety for our most vulnerable populations. So I would encourage everybody to read carefully through the document from Attorney Daniel Lober dated April 24th, both his memo, the operating agreement memo, as well as his red line version. I hope, I don't know if the public can have access to that or not, but I think it's so important, and I will continue to advocate for the highest standard of safety measures and health measures for our residents at the Margarita Inn and in other situations that require strong advocacy and standards that are in place. Thank you.
Councilmember Harris.
Good evening. May 16th will be the second ward meeting at Robert Crown and 7 p.m. in room D. Wanted to wish anyone still up a happy Mother's Day, as that will be this coming Sunday. And that's it. Thank you.
Councilmember Nguyen.
Yes, I'd also like to offer my condolences to the family of Steve Engelman. I served with him for 2 terms, and Councilmember Ravel's description of him was perfect. Thank you.
Councilmember Nusma.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Fourth Ward office hours this Saturday, May 13th at Reprise Roasters on Main Street. And then the next ward meeting will be June 6th at Robert Crown.
And now Councilmember Nusma is recognized to make a motion.
Pursuant to 5 Illinois compiled statutes 120/2A, I move that the City Council convene into executive session to discuss agenda items regarding personnel, purchase or use of real property, and litigation. These agenda items are permitted subjects to be considered in executive session and are enumerated exceptions under the Open Meetings Act as set forth in 5 ILCS 120/2A. Sections C1, C5, and C11. Sorry. Did I say that twice? It's late.
Councilmember Nusma moves that the City Council resolve itself into an executive session to discuss items related to personnel, real property, and litigation. Councilmember Harris seconds. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will the clerk please take the roll?
Councilmember Burns.
Aye.
Councilmember Ravel.
Aye.
Councilmember Reed.
Aye.
Councilmember Hadakaris.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly. Councilmember Harris. Councilmember Nguyen. Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
With 8 voting in favor and none voting against, the motion carries. And at 10:51 p.m., the City Council moves to an executive session to begin immediately in the council member library.